Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Peter Tobin. Peter Britton Tobin was born on August 27, 1946, in Johnstone, Scotland. He was the youngest of 8 children born to Marjorie and Daniel Tobin. From an early age, Peter displayed an impulsive personality, prompting his parents to send him to boarding school in 1953 when he was only 7 years old. However, this did not work, and he was sent to a reformatory. After completing his time there, he moved to Brighton, England. There, Peter began a relationship with Margaret Mount, a young typist who was attracted to his personality. They married in August 1969, but soon, Peter's ruthless, controlling, and abusive personality manifested itself. Not only that, Peter also became involved in criminal activities. A year later, he was convicted and imprisoned in England for theft and counterfeiting. Margaret decided to divorce him in 1973. Peter then married Sylvia Jeffri, a 30-year-old local nurse, who was also attracted to his charm. That year, they had their first son, Ian, and a year later, a daughter, Claire, who unfortunately died shortly after birth. Sylvia was devastated by the loss of her child, became a victim of Peter's abuse, and decided to leave in 1976, taking their young son with her. Years later, when he was in his 40s, Peter was ready for a new romantic relationship. This time, he chose Cathy Wilson, a sensitive, naive, and impressionable 16-year-old girl. This made it easy for Peter to start a relationship with Cathy. The two moved in together, and soon after, their son, Daniel, was born. They married in 1989 and moved to Scotland. This was a difficult time for Cathy. Her husband was controlling, preventing her from going out and becoming increasingly violent. Eventually, Cathy bravely decided to run away with her son in the late 1990s. Cathy's departure brought out the worst in Peter. After Cathy left, Peter met a gentle girl named Vicky Hamilton. Vicky was born in Scotland in 1976 and was the second child of Michael and Janet Hamilton. She had 3 siblings, Sharon, Lee, and Lindsay. However, arguments arose between Peter and Vicky and they quickly divorced. Vicky, Lee, and Lindsay lived with their mother and moved to South London. Sharon still lives in Bath, but this did not prevent Vicky and Sharon from maintaining the same close relationship as before. The evening of February 10th was cold and snowy. On a hangout with Sharon, Vicky checked her fare and went over the bus route with Sharon. They hugged goodbye. At the bus stop, while eating a bag of chips, Vicky met Peter. He pulled Vicky into his car, raped her, and then killed her. When Vicky failed to visit her mother's house, and there was no news of her, her family began to search for her. They reported her disappearance to the police. As the police investigated the case, Vicky's image became prominent across Scotland, and the search for her became one of the largest in the country's history. The runaway theory was reinforced on February 21, 1991, when Vicky's purse was found near the main bus station in Edinburgh. It was, in fact, a false clue planted by Peter to throw investigators off track. The attempt was successful, sending the investigation off track. Detectives spent 2 months searching London unsuccessfully. It was then revealed that Vicky's mother had died. Over the next 10 years, Vicky's family and townspeople continued to pursue the case, but with more than 7,000 names on file, nearly 4,000 statements taken, some 500 documents and 380 potential physical evidence, all to no avail. The case was eventually dropped. The next young woman to have Peter's misfortune was Dinah McNicol, an Essex native with a brother and 3 sisters. Her father was a jazz musician and her mother had died in a car accident many years earlier. At 18, Dinah was a kind, cheerful girl and a great friend. She had just graduated from high school and had high hopes for the future. She was torn between taking a year off to travel or going to college, but she was undecided. On the first weekend of August 1991, Dinah attended a music festival in Hampshire. There, she met a boy named David Tremlett. They quickly fell in love. On Sunday, August 4th, they spent the night together in a tent. The next day, Dinah helped him take down the tent and they agreed to each hitchhike home. As they were both tired, Peter showed up and offered to give them a ride. David got out of the car first, and Dinah saved Peter's number before parting ways. Alone with the strange driver, the girl was about to face a real nightmare. On Monday, August 5, 1991, he did the same to her as he had done to Vicky. Dinah's scarf became a crime tool. After the crime, Peter withdrew money from Dinah's account at ATMs in Hampshire and Sussex. When Dinah's family saw the withdrawals from her account, they immediately suspected something was wrong. They knew she had carefully saved every penny and planned to use it for travel or education. As the days passed, the family lived in fear and uncertainty, which was the worst thing. Although no one said it, everyone believed that something terrible had happened. If Dinah were still alive, she would have returned home or called to explain her absence. As for Peter, he left Margate without saying goodbye or explaining anything. In 1993, he settled in Hampshire, renting a flat in Leek Park, saying he wanted to be closer to his son. On August 4, 1993, two 14-year-old girls went to visit Dinah but did not see her. So they asked the neighbors if anyone had seen Dinah, which led to them knocking on Peter's door. Peter invited the two girls into his house, ostensibly to wait for Dinah. They saw his friendly 5-year-old son and agreed without suspicion. While the child was asleep, Peter began to torment the two girls. He threatened them with a knife and forced them to drink alcohol, then beat and raped them. One of the girls was seriously injured. Fortunately, the child woke up in time and saved them from the same terrible fate as the two previous victims. Peter wanted to hide the truth from his son, so he decided to leave the apartment with the child. Before leaving at around 2 a.m., he turned on the gas stove to complete his monstrous plan. However, the two girls were lucky to wake up and escape. They went to the police and reported everything that had happened. After that, Peter returned the child to his mother and joined a sect called the Jesus Fellowship under a false name. But the media published his photo, provided by the police, and his face became widely known. With the help of BBC Crime Watch, Peter was finally arrested after 40 days on the run in Brighton. Peter appeared in court on May 18, 1994 and pleaded guilty to sexual assault and indecent assault on two young girls. As a result, he was sentenced to 14 years in prison. However, Peter was released in 2014 at the age of 58 without serving the full sentence. After his release, Peter returned to Scotland with the aim of hiding in the same area to avoid being identified as a sex offender. He evaded capture for a long time until 2006. During this time, Peter used a false name and posed as a homeless person. He sought refuge at St. Patrick's Cathedral in Glasgow. Under the name Peter McLaughlin, Peter approached a charity couple from the church group, Dennis and Katie Curran. Katie still felt uneasy about Peter despite his frail appearance. On the other hand, having been raised Catholic, Peter felt comfortable in the church. He begged there, which helped him gain sympathy from the parishioners. This gave Peter the freedom to move around unnoticed and provided him with an ideal hiding place. Here, Peter met Angelika Kluk, a 23-year-old girl from Poland. She came to Scotland in the summer of 2006 to work and pay for her language lessons. Angelika was living in the rectory of St. Patrick's Church and doing cleaning work. Peter took an immediate liking to Angelika and convinced her to help him with various tasks. On Sunday, September 24, 2006, Angelika helped Peter paint a shed. Some parishioners saw them together. But unexpectedly, Peter attacked Angelika at the back of the chapel. Liga Brown, 47, and her husband, Andrew, 46, were at home when they heard a woman screaming through an open window. Liga described the scream as a short, loud sound, like someone being forcibly restrained. The scream made her nervous and she got up from her chair, but when she got to the window, she couldn't see anything. Hours passed and the parishioners noticed that Angelika was no longer there. That was when Dennis and Katie quickly reported the unusual disappearance to the police. The police immediately began investigating and interviewed every member of the community. During these interviews, it was discovered that the last person anyone saw with Angelika was Peter, albeit under the guise of a homeless. He eventually became the prime suspect and the police came to question him, but found no evidence. The investigation continued. Peter knew that it was only a matter of time before they found the body and traced it back to him, so he fled to London. By this time, Detective David Swindle had joined the investigation and began to suspect that this might not just be a disappearance. Everything they found, as well as the testimonies they gathered, made him think that Angelika was unlikely to be found alive. Finally, on September 29, 2006, authorities discovered the body in the chapel. This news shocked British society, especially because of the location chosen by the perpetrator to hide the body. Looking at the injuries sustained by the girl, Detective David suspected that the perpetrator was not acting for the first time. However, there was more news to come. The DNA found at the crime scene and on the victim's body matched the data in the United Kingdom's National Criminal Intelligence Database. That's when they learned that the man they were looking for was Peter Tobin, whose fingerprints were also found at the crime scene. The first step for the authorities was to publish his photograph in the media. His image was also sent nationwide for distribution and the Scottish police contacted the Metropolitan Police, initiating a search throughout the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, Peter, who was in London, tried to hide in a place where he believed he wouldn't be sought. He went to a hospital, pretending to have heart problems, claiming to have chest pain and weakness on the left side of his body. He identified himself as a plumber and called himself James Kelly. He was examined by Dr. Nick Lasso, who conducted several tests. However, something in his demeanor and behavior made the doctor uncomfortable. Initially, he avoided eye contact, which was unusual for a patient. Then, when the tests didn't reveal any physical reasons for the pain he claimed to be experiencing, the doctor became suspicious. His suspicions were confirmed by a nurse who recognized Peter from a photograph circulating in the media. As a result, both the nurse and the doctor contacted the police. This phone call changed the entire dynamic of the investigation. On September 30th, police officer Alan Murray was dispatched to the hospital in London. Peter was taken to a room and Alan went to talk to him. He was immediately arrested. Although initially, he was charged only with a violation of the sex offender registry, this thing allowed the officers to buy time to prepare a criminal case against him. Evidence gathered by the police team led by Detective David led to Peter's trial for the crimes committed against Angelika in late March 2007. Despite all the evidence against him, Peter denied committing any violent acts against the young woman. However, in an attempt to shift blame for the rape, he claimed that they engaged in consensual sexual activity. Peter also denied providing false information to the police and hospital staff. After 6 weeks of legal proceedings, his lies and manipulations proved futile as he was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 21 years. Detective David and his team suspected that there were more mysteries to Peter's story. During the trial, the detectives further investigated Peter's life, gathered more evidence and built a profile with the cooperation of various law enforcement agencies. To avoid affecting the case involving Angelika, they chose to carry out their work discreetly and carefully. The joint police investigation was called Anagram. Investigators identified links between the disappearances and locations that Peter had visited. The investigation revealed 2 exact links, one in Bathgate and one in Margate. A search was then carried out at Peter's old house on the coast, and they found a knife with traces of DNA hidden in the attic. However, no other findings were made at the location. Investigators then visited the house where he lived in Margate and established that he was a dangerous serial offender. A search of the house revealed a secret grave in the garden that he had created for his son. Investigators dug up a sand pit in the garden and found the body of a woman. Further searches at the same location uncovered another body. A woman's handbag was found at the crime scene and was collected for DNA analysis. As well as identifying the 2 victims, the handbag was also analyzed. Although the handbag clearly contained DNA, there was no match in the National DNA database. However, on June 1, 2007, investigators found a DNA match to Peter's fingerprints. This was a vital lead, and they decided to pursue this line of investigation. On November 14, 2007, the authorities confirmed that one of the bodies was that of Vicky Hamilton, who had gone missing at the age of 15. Her family had waited 16 years for any information about her. They later identified the second body as that of 18-year-old Dinah McNicol, who was hitchhiking home after attending a concert. On September 1, 2008, the Crown Prosecution Service charged Peter with Vicky's murder, leading to his trial. When Vicky's father, Michael, saw Peter, he was restrained by the police, as at that point he just wanted Peter to know that he was there to defend his daughter's honor and remember her. Peter faced sentencing after a month of trial on December 2, 2008, when he was convicted of Vicky's murder and sentenced to life in prison. A year later, in December 2009, Dinah's trial took place. On December 16, due to the defense's failure to provide evidence to exonerate his client, the jury found Peter guilty of Dinah's murder. As a result, he was given an additional life sentence. 5 months before his trial, a report on November 22, 2007, stated that Peter Tobin had been attacked by fellow inmates in prison, but he only suffered minor injuries. During the investigation, Peter Tobin also confessed to a total of 11 murders. Peter died in hospital on October 8, 2022. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Liga Skromane. Liga Skromane was born in 1986 in Latvia, where she grew up in a close-knit family with an older brother and a younger sister. She later moved to Ireland but remained close to her family. It was there that she met her future husband, Andrew Jordan. Despite struggling to connect with new people, the couple married 5 years later and shared big plans for their future. Liga worked at a hotel and lived modestly, but dreamed of opening a yoga retreat center in Portugal. Andrew supported her idea, and they saved money for 4 years to make it a reality. In early 2018, Liga was suffering from a severe skin condition that was affecting her physical and mental well-being. Her sister Ilse invited her on a trip to help her overcome this condition and regain her emotional balance. In February 2018, Liga and Ilse traveled to Thiruvananthapuram, the capital of Kerala, India, where Liga could receive Ayurvedic treatment for depression. Ayurveda, recognized by the World Health Organization since 1985 as one of the most effective alternative medicine systems, offered a promising solution for Liga's health issues. It's important to note that Ayurveda is not a cure-all, but rather a complementary approach to achieving healthy longevity. Liga, 33, and her sister Ilse traveled to Kerala seeking spiritual growth and relief from depression at an Ayurveda center. Their 6-week treatment plan included yoga, meditation, herbal remedies, and personalized nutrition and massage guidance. On March 14th, Liga skipped a yoga class, citing a headache. When Ilse returned to their room, Liga was gone. With the hotel staff's help, Ilse discovered that Liga had left the hotel at 11:30 a.m. in casual clothing, taking an auto rickshaw to Kovalam Beach for a walk. However, Liga was nowhere to be found on the beach, despite Ilse's thorough search until nightfall. Ilse reported her sister's disappearance to the police, but they showed little concern, believing Liga would either be found or return on her own the next day. Although they registered a case, the investigation was sluggish, effectively stalled from the start. Ilse took her sister Liga on a trip to India to share with her the country she loved so deeply. Tragically, the trip took a devastating turn. When the Indian police failed to take action for several days, Ilse decided to take matters into her own hands and began searching for Liga. She received support from friends and also informed her husband Andrew about Liga's disappearance, prompting him to fly to India immediately. After Liga went missing, her husband Andrew Jordan and sister Ilse launched a campaign to find her, reaching out to the local press and creating an online appeal. Ilse also tweeted to India's Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj, pleading for help and offering a 100,000 rupee reward to anyone with information about Liga's disappearance. Ilse and her friend Alexa, who had flown to India to help with the search, put up posters and distributed flyers in the Kovalam Beach area where Liga was last seen. Many locals joined the search efforts. However, it's important to note that Liga struggled with depression and found it difficult to interact with strangers. On the day she vanished, she took an auto rickshaw to the beach and was never seen again. At the time, she had about 3,000 rupees with her, but no passport, which meant she couldn't leave the country. Ashok Kumar, the head of the local police station, claimed that they had no leads in Liga's disappearance. Initially, the police believed she might have gone on a drinking binge or eloped and would eventually return on her own. However, persistent requests for help from Ilse and Andrew prompted the police to launch a search operation in the Kovalam Beach area where Liga was last seen. Although a woman's body was found washed ashore in Kanyakumari district, it was not identified as Liga's. Andrew suspected that Liga had been kidnapped by local gangs to be sold, and he attempted to infiltrate these gangs to gather more information. However, he was exposed and warned that if he continued to contact the gangs, he would have to leave the country. A month after Liga's disappearance, there were still no leads to her whereabouts. Ilse continued to search for her sister, visiting Kovalam Beach daily and observing people. She developed a theory that the only way to leave the beach unnoticed was by boat. Andrew returned to India on April 17, 2018, and joined Ilse in a new effort to find Liga, but her body remained unfound. The search for Liga was made more challenging due to her being a tourist and a citizen of another country. The Latvian Foreign Ministry maintained close contact with Liga's family and collaborated with the Indian authorities throughout the search process. The Latvian embassy also reached out to the Indian Foreign Ministry for special assistance in finding Liga. Additionally, the Honorary Consul of Latvia in India, whose jurisdiction includes the region where Liga went missing, was involved in the search efforts. At the request of the Coral State government, the Indian Navy and Air Force participated in the search operation. The search effort was extensive, utilizing an AN-32 transport plane, Gemini inflatable boats, underwater sonar, and 5 deep-sea divers. Unfortunately, despite these efforts, Liga remained missing and the desired outcome was not achieved. By this point, everyone in the local community was aware of the missing tourist from Latvia and was supporting and sympathizing with Andrew and Ilse. On April 20, 2018, Ila received the most awaited yet devastating call of her life. A body had been found in the mangrove jungle. She and Andrew rushed to the designated spot where the police were waiting to take them to the scene by boat. Elsa's heart was racing as she felt the overwhelming horror of the situation. As they arrived, Elsa was met with a gruesome sight. She recognized her sister's clothes, including the shirt and leggings, on the body. However, the jacket and shoes did not belong to Liga. It remained a mystery how Liga had ended up in this remote location, accessible only by going through Panatur from Samudra Beach. 2 women came forward, confirming that they had seen Liga traveling alone into the mangrove forest. But the question remained, why would a girl struggling with depression, already alone, take a boat to such a remote and inaccessible place in the forest? The body was taken to the Medical College Hospital for an autopsy, which was recorded on video. The police stated that they couldn't confirm the identity of the body until DNA analysis was complete. According to the city police commissioner, the body was severely mutilated, with the head found nearby. Although the police have tentatively identified the deceased as Liga, a missing tourist, they need DNA confirmation. Supporting the investigators' conclusion is the fact that Liga's relatives identified the victim by her hair and clothes. One possible theory, according to India's rescue services, is that Liga might have been poisoned by accidentally or intentionally eating the fruit of poisonous pong trees found in the mangrove forest. Between 1989 and 1999, over 500 people died from poisoning by these fruits in Kerala alone. The idea initially seemed absurd, given the body was found hanging upside down, without a head. However, if Liga had been poisoned, her body would likely have been in a different position, and her head would have been in place. Indian authorities were spouting absurdities based on misinformation about Liga's complex psychological issues. The investigators also considered the possibility that Liga had willingly abandoned her life. Ilse was concerned that the police would try to cover up her sister's murder by claiming she had voluntarily ended her life, despite the presence of a rope at the scene, which suggested the hiker had hanged herself. Elsa demanded a credible explanation for the missing head, and Ilse sarcastically retorted, "Don't tell me it's just lost." Here are the forensic test results that Ilse and the public were waiting for. The evidence is overwhelming. The autopsy reveals that Liga Skromane was strangled to death by multiple people during a violent attack. There were blood pools in her brain, bruising on her neck, and external injuries on her body, likely sustained during the struggle. Although the body was decomposing, the characteristic injuries on her throat cartilage indicate that someone forcefully squeezed her throat. The trauma was severe and fatal. Blood clots in her brain confirm strangulation, and bruises were found on her neck and legs, with a total of 9 wounds recorded on her body. Based on the autopsy results, the police no longer consider Liga's death to be voluntary. Instead, they believe she was murdered after putting up a struggle. Ilse, Liga's sister, felt a sense of relief that the police were now taking the case seriously and hoped they would soon find the killers. As part of their investigation, the police started questioning local drug dealers and card players. They also spoke to local residents, 2 of whom reported seeing Liga walking alone to the area where her body was later discovered. However, the police had doubts about the credibility of these eyewitnesses. Liga's family has criticized the Indian police, accusing them of incompetence. They believe that if the police had launched a search for Liga immediately, the tragedy might have been prevented. The 33-year-old Latvian tourist is thought to have been kidnapped from a nearby beach, taken by boat, and then strangled. A special team of investigators has been formed to find those responsible for the crime. So far, around 40 suspects have been questioned, and arrests are expected to be made in the coming days once the authorities have gathered sufficient evidence. The Indian police conducted an investigation that led to the arrest of 2 men who were accused of murdering Liga Skromane. According to the police, Liga Skromane was lured by the 2 men, who then subjected her to physical abuse before dismembering her body. The 2 alleged assailants, now in custody, were local dealers of illegal substances. Both suspects, who were also pimps, fully confessed to the crime while under interrogation. However, the autopsy did not provide much evidence due to the advanced state of decomposition of Liga Skromane's body. Andrew Jordan filed a petition in Superior Court to review a felony murder case, suspecting that more people were involved in the woman's murder. He noted that both defendants had recanted their guilty pleas, suggesting that they may have confessed due to torture, a common practice in India. However, the Supreme Court of India denied the murdered woman's common-law husband a review of the case, citing a lack of direct evidence. Andrew was outraged when the trial was postponed for 2 months. He had previously accused the authorities and police of incompetence and attempting to cover up the murder to avoid scaring off tourists. The suspect's lawyers requested and received a postponement, which they are legally entitled to do once without providing a reason. Andrew believed that the more the case was delayed, the more likely it was that the investigation was flawed. Despite his concerns, both suspects remained in custody. An investigation into Liga Skromane's murder revealed that 2 men, Umesh, 32, and Udayakumar, 28, offered her drugs, specifically Liga Skromane weed, and then strangled and decapitated her after she was incapacitated. The 2 suspects were arrested and found to have a history of committing similar crimes on multiple occasions. They worked for a food delivery company in Kerala's capital city and moonlighted as illegal tour guides. Umesh and Udayakumar have been charged with multiple crimes, including destruction of evidence, murder, poisoning, kidnapping, and rape. The location where Liga's body was discovered had previously been used by Umesh as a meeting spot for his male clients. He has a long history of criminal activity, with 13 cases filed against him, including 6 for sexual assault and 1 for attempted murder. Several of Umesh's victims have come forward to testify against him. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Liga with the 2 men in the area. Initially, they denied any involvement, but after Liga's body was found, they confessed to the murder, which was committed during an act of violence. The suspects were arrested, but initially claimed they only saw Liga in Kovalam. After repeated questioning, they eventually pleaded guilty. On December 6, 2022, the court sentenced the 2 men to life in prison and ordered them to pay 65,000 rupees each in compensation to Ilsa, Liga's sister. India has seen a surge in violent crimes against young girls, with a high number of sexual offenses committed against minors. In response, the government has introduced the death penalty to address the acute problem of crime in the country. The persistence of Liga's relatives, particularly her sister, and the involvement of the press and an influential MP were crucial in ensuring the case was thoroughly investigated. Initially, the local police were not taking the case seriously, suggesting that Liga may have voluntarily disappeared. This is not an isolated incident in this area, where similar cases have occurred before. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Cassandra Cantrell. Cassandra and her twin brother Rob shared a unique bond, fueled by their love of scary stories. As kids, they'd spend hours in a darkened room, taking turns telling each other spine-tingling tales. Rob fancied himself a master storyteller, but Cassandra would always scream at the end of each story, teasing him about not being scary enough. They'd also watch Scooby-Doo together, debating which characters might be ghosts or vampires in disguise. Cassandra's instincts often proved correct, leaving Rob on edge. Their mother, Mary Smith, encouraged their love of reading by buying them books by Robert Wall. What started as a childhood hobby evolved into a lifelong passion for horror. As adults, they even collected villain figurines and considered opening a horror-themed store. An interest in horror movies brought Cassandra to the set in 2004. She got a cameo in a scary movie that, although it didn't become popular, still caused a storm of envy and led Rob to start asking his sister to make a deal for him. He asked her if she had made some acquaintances there and said he was ready to play anyone. He urged her to talk, adding that he was pretty close with the head of the cast and maybe something would come out of it, but he made no promises. Cassandra replied that she had gotten the part by accident herself. Rob was very happy, but despite his enthusiasm, he was not able to play, even in an episodic role. The lead actor in the movie was Colin Dudley, and on set, he and the debutante actress felt an undeniable chemistry. However, neither of them dared to take the first step. That was until they attended a corporate Halloween party together. Cassandra dressed up as Velma from Scooby-Doo, while Colin went as Alex from A Clockwork Orange. The costume held a deeper significance for Colin than just a simple character. It seemed to resonate with him on a deeper level. He had been walking with a glass of milk all evening, looking at everyone with a glare, just as his character had done in the movie. He had also quoted a lot from the book. For example, he had looked at Cassandra with delight and had said that beauty invariably caused his only desire to destroy it, for it did not fit at all into their ugly world. Cassandra had thought it was a compliment, and they had soon started dating, but their relationship had not lasted long, only a couple of months. Colin had found another actress, Rebecca, and had started dating her, and later on, the couple had started living together. On August 25, 2020, Cassandra Cantrell vanished without warning. She drove away from home in an unknown direction and failed to respond to phone calls. When her mother, Mary Smith, reported her disappearance to the police, they were initially reluctant to take action, suggesting that Cassandra might simply be out with friends and would turn up soon. But Mary was convinced that something was seriously wrong and pressed the police to investigate. It took 2 days for them to begin searching for Cassandra, and on the third day, they found her car parked under a bridge in a notorious neighborhood known for its high crime rate and homeless population. The car was unlocked and the keys were still inside. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Why was Cassandra in this dangerous area, known for its frequent violent crimes and drug-related deaths? The police had to canvass the neighborhood, questioning homeless individuals who, unsurprisingly, were hesitant to cooperate with the authorities. The residents living under the bridge, who spent their days drinking, had no information about Cassandra's whereabouts or when her car arrived. This lack of knowledge was hardly surprising. The detective in charge of searching for Cassandra had obtained her cell phone billing records, as per protocol, but based on his experience, he doubted it would lead to any useful leads, and indeed, it didn't. The signal from Cassandra's phone indicated it was in the nearby body of water under the bridge. Unfortunately, this meant the detectives would be unable to retrieve the phone and access the crucial information it held. Prior to conducting a thorough search of the coastal area, a team of divers stood on the shore and tested the distance they could throw rocks into the water. This test would help them gauge the likelihood of finding the phone. Cassandra's mother had mentioned that her daughter's phone case was adorned with distinctive rhinestones, making it easier to spot. As it turned out, the phone was soon found, but sadly, Cassandra's body was not in the water. While the detectives presented this as a positive development, Cassandra's mother remained distraught and unconsoled. She seemed to have gotten used to the idea that her daughter was dead, and the only thing she wanted was for her body to be found and for the nightmare of uncertainty to end. She sadly mentioned that she had been looking forward to her granddaughter, wanted to be a grandmother sooner, and didn't even have time to give her a crib, which was just sitting in the garage in a box. She wondered what she should do with it now, not realizing that this became important information for the investigation. According to statistics, a large number of crimes against pregnant women are committed by their partners. However, Mary Smith's daughter, Cassandra, was not married and did not have a partner. Despite her age, Cassandra was not in a relationship with anyone. Mary was puzzled because Cassandra had gotten pregnant, but she had no information about the baby's father. Cassandra had been in frequent contact with someone, often calling and messaging them. However, the phone number of this person was not recorded in Cassandra's phone book, and Mary couldn't remember the number. This lack of information left Mary in the dark about the identity of her future grandchild's father. Cassandra frequently communicated with a person without saving their number, which was unusual. Typically, girls couldn't keep their relationships completely secret and would confide in at least one friend, especially when it came to sensitive topics like pregnancy. In this case, the friend was acquainted with police officers. In conversation with the police, Cassandra revealed that she had reunited with her former boyfriend, Colin Dudley. Although their initial relationship in 2004 was brief, it was surprising that they reconnected after 15 years apart. What was even more unexpected was that Colin, with whom Cassandra worked on a movie set in 2014, was the one who reached out to her. Colin reached out to Cassandra on Facebook, expressing condolences and sharing the recent loss of his father, with whom his wife Rebecca had a troubled history. Cassandra, motivated by kindness, agreed to meet Colin to offer comfort, but their encounter blossomed into a romantic connection. From 2014 onwards, Colin led a double life, juggling two families, with Cassandra as his mistress. When Cassandra discovered she was pregnant, she chose not to inform Colin, recalling his earlier statement that he didn't want children and was happy with Rebecca's infertility. Fearful that revealing the pregnancy would disrupt his primary family, Cassandra kept the news secret. However, as her belly grew, it became increasingly difficult to conceal. To avoid arousing Colin's suspicion, Cassandra stopped seeing him. Cassandra knew she couldn't keep her secret hidden forever. Lying about having another boyfriend would hurt Colin and lead to their breakup. So she made the difficult decision to tell him the truth. She was pregnant with his child. Over the phone, Colin initially remained silent, but then surprisingly expressed his delight at the news. Cassandra believed he was genuinely happy about it. Meanwhile, a detective arrived at Colin's house and knocked on the door. Colin's wife answered, and the detective, not wanting to discuss Colin's missing mistress in front of her, introduced himself as an old friend of Dudley's, avoiding any awkwardness. Colin quickly left the house with the detective, shutting the door behind him, and walked away from the house without even waiting for an introduction. He seemed to have been expecting their meeting. Colin thanked the detective for being discreet about his credentials in front of Rebecca. He spoke in short sentences, explaining that he had heard Cassandra was missing and found it extremely strange. He admitted he couldn't even guess where she might have gone. He told the detective that Cassandra had confided in him about her fight with her brother and was worried about it. He had advised her to make amends, but didn't know if she had taken his advice. The detective already knew about the fight between Cassandra and her brother, Rob, who had spoken to him about it. Rob had refused to meet with Cassandra on the day she disappeared, which he now regretted. Colin blamed himself for not being able to prevent her disappearance, thinking that if she had visited him that day, she might still be safe. Colin confessed to the detective that he wasn't a good person and acknowledged his past mistakes. He had secretly dated his ex-girlfriend, Cassandra, while still married to Rebecca, knowing it was wrong. He believed that his actions would have consequences in the afterlife, but insisted that he couldn't help who he fell in love with. After his father's death in 2014, Colin resumed his relationship with Cassandra, fulfilling one of his father's wishes. He had broken up with her soon after Christmas, which his father had criticized him for. His father had liked Cassandra, unlike Rebecca, whom he hated. Colin explained that living a double life for 5 years had been exhausting and guilt-ridden. He made excuses to hide his late-night returns, pretending to go on business trips or fishing, which he despised. He even bought fish to deceive Rebecca, who would cook them, despite the smell making him sick. Colin mentioned that Cassandra was pregnant, but didn't know who the father was. He heard from a close friend that Cassandra claimed the baby was his, which he found hard to believe. Lately, Cassandra had been avoiding him, and he understood why, as she wanted a family, something he couldn't provide. The detective asked Colin when he last saw Cassandra, and he replied that he couldn't remember, guessing it was around 3 to 4 months ago, except for a brief encounter at the mall when his wife was in the fitting room. Colin asked the detective if they thought they would find Cassandra alive, and the detective assured him they were doing everything possible. However, This wasn't Colin's last encounter with the detective. The police discovered that Colin was the owner of the unsigned phone number Cassandra's mother had mentioned. It turned out that Cassandra had frequently called Colin, including on the day she disappeared. Additionally, CCTV footage from the train station near the bridge where her car was found showed a suspicious man on the platform. The suspect wore a disguise, covering his face and head, making it impossible to identify him. However, the detective noticed that the man's gait and hat were eerily similar to those of Colin, Dudley, and Alex from A Clockwork Orange. The detectives followed the suspect through CCTV cameras, watching as he entered a cafe, left, and drove away in a car with a license plate registered to Colin Dudley. Armed with a search warrant, the police searched Colin's house, hoping to find Cassandra alive in the basement. Initially, they found no evidence of a crime, but they did discover the hat Colin had worn as a disguise. In the basement, a service dog trained to detect blood scents began barking, suggesting something was amiss. Colin claimed innocence, stating that the police were trying to frame him due to a lack of evidence and suspects. His wife was shocked and upset, but when asked if she thought her husband was capable of murder, she hesitated before saying no. Despite the circumstantial evidence, there wasn't enough to imprison Colin, frustrating Rob and Mary Smith and leaving the detective feeling helpless. Colin was questioned again, and he provided an alibi, stating that he had visited a hardware store on the morning of August 25th to buy cleaning supplies and trash bags. However, the large trash bags raised suspicions. The police also discovered a deleted text message from Cassandra, stating that she was approaching Colin's house. Additionally, phone records showed that the couple hadn't left the house for hours that morning. Colin had turned off his phone, but accidentally left Cassandra's phone on, allowing the police to track his movements, including his presence on CCTV cameras. After the murder, Colin went to a cafe to clean up, then drove to the pond where he had thrown away Cassandra's phone, which the police had tracked to its last signal. Now, the police needed to find Cassandra's body. To retrace Colin's route, the police took a GPS tracker from his car, which showed that it had followed the same path as Cassandra's phone. The next day, the police followed Colin's path through the woods and found a large trash can tied with ropes in a ravine. The area around it was covered in blood, and it was clear what was inside. After a month, identifying the body was difficult, but the police were able to do so thanks to a tattoo described in the missing persons report. Colin was arrested and charged with murder. A forensic examination revealed that Cassandra died from a fractured skull caused by blunt force trauma. The police also found traces of blood in the basement of the Dudley house that couldn't be fully cleaned. Rebecca, Colin's wife, had been in a different part of the house and hadn't heard anything. She also revealed that Colin had never wanted children and had lied about her infertility. The police considered this a motive for the crime. During the trial, due to a lack of witnesses and physical evidence, the jury couldn't be convinced that Colin had committed the murder. So, the court offered Colin a deal. If he pleaded guilty, he would get a shorter sentence. Colin was sentenced to 26 years in prison. Cassandra's mother and brother were devastated, feeling guilty that they hadn't met with Cassandra before her death, and that the killer would likely be released one day. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Heather Jackson. Heather Jackson was 23 years old in 2012, and her life was a challenge. She had recently separated from her husband, Wayne, and they were in the process of getting a divorce. They had 2 young children, 3-year-old Selena and 1-year-old Wayne Jr. Despite the difficulties they faced as parents, Heather was determined to provide a happy life for her kids. She had found a new home on a quiet street near Lake Erie, which brought her some sense of relief. Heather and Wayne had been high school sweethearts, but their marriage had fallen apart. On September 8, 2012, Heather's friend Danielle Sorrell arrived at her house at 2:30 p.m. for a prearranged meeting. However, when Danielle knocked on the door, no one answered. She checked all the doors, but they were locked, leaving her wondering what was going on. Danielle was puzzled that Heather and her kids weren't at home despite their planned meeting. Even if Heather had changed her plans, she would have alerted Danielle. So, Danielle called Heather's mom, Jody, who was very close to her daughter and spoke with her daily. However, Jody couldn't reach Heather that day either. Danielle then contacted all of Heather's friends, but none of them knew her whereabouts. Her concern grew when she spotted Selena's pacifier on the porch. Danielle knew Heather would never leave the house without the pacifier, so something was off. Hours passed, but Heather still hadn't contacted her mom. Jody's unease called the police to request a check. The officers arrived, knocked on the door, and got no response. They circled the house, peeking through the windows, but saw nothing suspicious. Since they found no signs of forced entry or foul play, they couldn't enter the house without a warrant and left. At approximately 7:30 p.m., Heather's friends, Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, arrived at her house after discovering she was missing. When no one answered the front door, Reiner proceeded to the back porch, forced the door open, and entered the home. Inside, they found Heather's naked body in the bedroom and immediately called 911. Sergeant Eric Gray Bill, a Sandusky police officer, responded to the scene and entered the house. He discovered Heather's body lodged between the box spring and mattress in her bedroom, with a ligature around her neck. The TV was still on, but the children were nowhere to be found. Their room was empty. During their search of the house, the officers noticed a utility closet door that they had not yet checked. When Sergeant Bill opened the door, he found stacked boxes with objects behind them. Behind the boxes, he discovered the lifeless bodies of Heather's children. The police immediately secured the crime scene. The officers were deeply shaken by the discovery, having never encountered a crime of such magnitude before. Heather's family and friends were even more devastated after the forensic examination results were revealed. According to court documents, Dr. Diana Scala Barnett, the deputy coroner for Lucas County, performed the autopsies on the 3 victims. Her findings showed that Heather Jackson's cause of death was ligature strangulation. Additionally, Dr. Barnett observed that Heather's rectum was unusually open after death, suggesting that an object was likely inserted into the area around the time of her death, causing it to remain in that state. Dr. Scala Barnett testified that both Wayne Jackson and Selena Jackson also died from ligature strangulation. She noted that Selena's underwear was rolled up, indicating that the body had been redressed. Selena also had a rectal dilation similar to her mother's, again indicating that something was in her rectum at or about the time of death. Julie Cox, a forensic scientist at the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, testified that there was seminal fluid on the anal swabs obtained from Selena Jackson. Cox also noticed a stain in Selena Jackson's underwear, so she cut a small portion of that stained area for testing and determined that it contained a sperm cell. The police were determined to quickly catch the monster responsible for the crime. Since Heather's house was located next to Firelands Regional Medical Center, investigators obtained footage from the building's surveillance cameras, which they hoped would lead them to the perpetrator. Reviewing the CCTV footage, they identified a car that drove up to Heather's house at 10:57 p.m. Although the camera was far from the house and the darkness made it difficult to see, the car's headlights provided some clues about what happened. The footage showed the car backing into the driveway and remaining there for 11 minutes. At 11:08 p.m., the headlights turned on again, and the driver departed. Meanwhile, Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, the men who discovered Heather's body, were brought to the police station for questioning. The investigators questioned them separately, starting with Dan Reiner, who had called 911. Dan and Heather were friends, and when Dan discovered she was missing, he went to her house to look for her. He had to push the door hard to get in. After calling 911, the police asked Dan for a DNA sample, which he willingly provided. The results are nothing special, and he was released. The police then questioned Thomas Hansen, who claimed to have spoken with Heather on the phone the previous night. He said he drove to her house around 11 p.m. but didn't go inside. Instead, they chatted briefly outside, and then he left. This revelation helped the police identify the driver of the car seen on CCTV footage, Thomas Hansen. Hansen also revealed that he didn't enter Heather's house because she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, someone Hansen knew as Josh. Hansen's account matched Reiner's, stating that when he learned Heather was missing, he went to her house to investigate. After releasing the initial suspect, the police shifted their focus to a new suspect, Josh Case, who was at Heather's house on the night of her death. They quickly located him and brought him in for questioning. Josh admitted to knowing Heather for years and being at her house that evening, where they watched TV while the children slept. He also claimed to have gone to the store to buy breakfast for the kids, returning to the house before a friend picked him up at around 1 a.m. Josh acknowledged having consensual intimate contact with Heather. Investigators verified his alibi by reviewing the store's CCTV footage, which confirmed he entered the store at 11:20 p.m. While this corroboration supported his testimony, it did not rule out the possibility that Josh might still be involved in Heather's tragic death. Heather's last known contact was with Josh Case, making him the prime suspect. He provided a DNA sample, which was compared to the DNA found on the victims' bodies. The results eliminated Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner as suspects, as their DNA did not match. However, Josh's DNA matched the DNA on Heather's body, but not on her children's bodies, indicating another person was present that night. This was not surprising, as Josh had previously admitted to an intimate relationship with Heather. The police now focused on finding the DNA of the second person involved. They quickly ruled out Heather's husband, Wayne, who was going through a divorce with Heather and lived in another state. The investigators turned to Heather's cell phone records for answers. The records showed Heather was active on her phone, including on the night of her death. Her last phone conversation took place at 3:12 a.m. and lasted 30 seconds. The police's next step was to identify the owner of the phone number Heather last spoke to. 36 hours after Heather's death, police obtained another CCTV footage that showed a white car arriving at her house around 3 a.m. This timing coincided with when Heather stopped using her phone, suggesting a possible connection. The car left about an hour later, by which time Heather, Selena, and Wayne were likely already dead. Although the footage was not clear enough to reveal the license plate, investigators identified the car as a Cadillac. Further investigation led police to the owner of the phone number Heather had called before her death. The number belonged to 41-year-old Curtis Clinton, who had a 30-second conversation with Heather at 3:12 a.m. A background check on Clinton revealed a disturbing history. He had been released from prison in February after serving 13 years for 2 counts of felonious assault and manslaughter. Clinton had pleaded guilty to the 1997 death of 18-year-old Misty Keckler, who was found strangled, naked, and bound in a bathtub. The similarities between Keckler's death and Heather's raised concerns among investigators, especially given that Clinton had been released from prison just 6 months before Heather and her children's deaths. This raised the possibility that Clinton had returned to his violent ways after his release. Curtis Clinton became the prime suspect in the murder of Heather and her children, and the police urgently needed to locate him to prevent any further harm. The police visited Clinton's last known address but were unable to find him. However, they soon discovered a white Cadillac parked on a nearby street. A search of the vehicle revealed a receipt from a gas station dated the night of the crime. The investigators reviewed the gas station's CCTV footage, which showed Clinton purchasing water and beer while appearing calm. This was after the time Heather and her children were killed. The police will receive information that a patient named Curtis Clinton had been admitted to a local hospital. They immediately went to the hospital, found Clinton, and arrested him, taking him into custody at the police station. Clinton denied any involvement in the deaths of Heather Jackson and her children. He admitted to having dated Heather for 5 months and having an intimate relationship with her. According to Clinton, Heather had many personal problems and had asked him for financial and emotional support. He claimed that he didn't know her children well. Clinton initially stated that he last saw Heather on Thursday, September 6th, when he gave her $328 and they had intimate contact. However, when the investigator showed him phone records indicating that he had spoken with Heather at 3:12 a.m. on September 8th, Clinton corrected himself, saying that it was actually Friday night or early Saturday morning when he last saw her. Clinton claimed that he didn't stay long at Heather's house, dropping off the money and then leaving after their intimate encounter. He couldn't recall what time he arrived home. Clinton suggested that someone else must have gone to Heather's house after he left, as Heather had mentioned receiving an irritating call or text while he was with her. When confronted with the fact that he was the last person to have contact with Heather, Clinton expressed doubt. Curtis Clinton was arrested and jailed after his DNA was found on the victims. In a recorded call to his mother, Clinton expressed regret and confusion, saying he wished he'd sought help. He also hinted at a violent temper, suggesting it could happen again. His mother acknowledged the family's struggles, but said they'd learned to manage them, and noted that Clinton had stopped taking his medication, which contributed to his behavior. Clinton told his mother that he planned to plead guilty to the charges and accept whatever consequences came his way. The investigation led to multiple charges against Clinton. Furthermore, it was discovered that just 6 days before the murder of Heather and her children, Clinton had attacked a 17-year-old girl, choking her and forcing her to engage in intimate contact. The victim had gone to the hospital, where police collected DNA evidence that also linked Clinton to the crime. Clinton asked to move the trial to a different location, claiming that the local media had already publicized the case so much that it would be hard to find impartial jurors. However, the court denied this request. Clinton brutally murdered Heather, Selena, and Wayne, and the forensic evidence, including his DNA found inside Selena's body, revealed the horrific details of his crimes. Despite facing the death penalty, Clinton did everything he could to avoid it. When given the opportunity to speak before being sentenced, he did not show remorse or apologize to the victims' families. Instead, he attacked prosecutor Kevin Baxter and vowed to win on appeal and have his case retried. In November 2013, Clinton was sentenced to death for the brutal murders of Heather Jackson and her 2 young children. The judge also sentenced Clinton to life in prison without parole for what he did to 3-year-old Selena before strangling her, and added another 10 years for assaulting a 17-year-old girl 6 days before killing Heather and her children. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ronda Casto. Julia Simmons resided with Stephen Nicholas, a divorced day trader, in his 3-bedroom home located outside of Portland, Oregon. Julia initially met Stephen online while searching for a rental property and found him to be charming and nice. During their cohabitation, Stephen met Julia's 20-year-old daughter Ronda. Stephen, being 10 years older than Ronda, was immediately smitten with her, drawn to her stunning beauty and captivating personality. As it turned out, Ronda reciprocated his interest, and they began dating. As their relationship advanced, Stephen and Ronda became more serious and eventually decided to move in together, with Ronda relocating to Stephen's condo. During their courtship, Stephen formed a close bond with Ronda's family, particularly her sisters Melanie and Tessa. Tessa, who was only 9 years old when Ronda and Stephen started dating, enjoyed spending time with him due to his playful and fun nature. Years passed, and Stephen and Ronda remained a committed couple, yet they never got married. Ronda often fantasized about what it would be like to be married to Stephen, Her friends were aware of her strong desire to get married and sensed that she was holding on to hope. Stephen assured her that they would tie the knot in the summer of 2009, according to his plan. After having a baby girl, Ronda discovered that being a mother became the most fulfilling part of her life. Her daughter became the center of her universe, and Ronda treasured every moment she shared with her. She was passionate about being a mom and spending time with her daughter. Nevertheless, she also longed to revive her modeling career. As Stephen put it, Ronda was at her heaviest after giving birth to their daughter. He stated that Ronda felt self-conscious about her weight. To lose weight, they made a pact to hike the 25 best trails in Oregon together. Stephen insisted that their relationship was thriving, and they rarely had disagreements. He believed that their bond had grown stronger than ever before. Ronda's friends told a different story, revealing that Ronda had confided in them about Stephen's abusive behavior. She had previously taken photos of bruises on her back, caused by a fight with Stephen on March 16, 2009, as evidence. However, according to Stephen, Ronda's behavior changed later on. He claimed that she asked him what would happen if anything ever happened to her and if he would take care of their daughter. Stephen said he replied, "Of course." As the weather worsened, Stephen told Ronda it was time to head home. But instead of turning back, Stephen alleged that Ronda wrapped a towel around her shoulders, declared herself Supergirl, and began to run down the narrow, slippery pathway. Stephen stated that he saw Ronda slip and fall 150 feet down the side of the Eagle Creek Trail. After the fall, Stephen claimed he hiked down to the ravine where she landed because he had no cell phone signal and found her body. Unable to call 911, he had to leave her behind. Stephen then walked to the trailhead, where he finally managed to contact emergency services. Later that day, rescue workers recovered Ronda's body. Ronda's family recalls that Stephen showed no emotion at her memorial service. However, Stephen disputes this, saying he cried non-stop and that when deeply upset, he tends to withdraw and prefer to be alone. After Ronda's death in 2006, Stephen packed up his and his daughter's belongings and relocated to the other side of Oregon, where his family lived. This sudden move raised suspicions among Ronda's family, who wondered what had happened between Stephen and Ronda in the moments leading up to her death. However, Stephen didn't stay in Oregon for long. Later that same year, he made the decision to move to China with his young daughter, marking a new chapter in their lives. Having lived in China during his first marriage, Stephen had developed a deep affection for the country and its people. They settled in Wuxi, a city about 75 miles outside of Shanghai. In China, Stephen found work teaching English to Chinese business professionals. His daughter quickly adapted to her new life, becoming fluent in Mandarin within just 2 months of their move. Both Stephen and his daughter were thriving in their new surroundings. During this time, Stephen met a woman named Landy Yin Yan and fell in love with her. Landy formed a strong bond with Stephen's daughter, taking on a motherly role and filling a gap in the girl's life. Stephen was grateful for Landy's influence on his daughter and appreciated the way she had stepped in to play a parental role. After a year of dating, Stephen proposed to Landy, and to his delight, she accepted. In February 2015, Stephen and his daughter traveled back to the United States, where he and Landy planned to get married. They decided to have 2 wedding ceremonies, one in America and one in China, in order to include both of their families and friends. Stephen and his daughter arrived in the United States a day before Landy did. As Stephen and his daughter stepped off the plane in San Francisco to catch their connecting flight to Oregon, an officer approached him and explained that they needed to detain him due to an issue with his luggage. Shortly after, the police arrived and took Stephen away from his daughter. Unbeknownst to him, while he was living in China, detectives had been diligently investigating his girlfriend Ronda's death, which had occurred under suspicious circumstances at Eagle Creek. After months of inquiry, they had finally concluded that Stephen was responsible for Ronda's murder. Ronda's mother had played a crucial role in keeping the investigation active, frequently inquiring about updates from the detectives. Consequently, the police arrested Stephen at the airport for Ronda's murder and extradited him to Oregon to face justice. When arrested, Stephen was in disbelief, thinking he was dreaming and hoping to wake up back in China with his daughter Landy by his side. However, he soon realized that this was not a nightmare, but harsh reality. Stephen's bail was initially set at $2 million, and he spent the next 14 months in prison awaiting trial. The judge lowered Stephen's bail to $250,000, and his attorney posted the bond, allowing Stephen to be released on condition that he wear an ankle monitor. Ronda's family was overjoyed when they learned that Stephen had been arrested for her murder, feeling that justice was finally being served. Ronda's mother was particularly emotional, bursting into tears when she heard the news. Stephen's arrest brought relief and solace to Ronda's loved ones, who had been grieving her loss for years. Following Stephen's arrest, his attorney led an investigative team to the Eagle Creek Trail, where Ronda had fallen to her death. They aimed to conduct experiments to demonstrate to the court that Ronda's death was an accidental slip, not a push by Stephen. Stephen's defense attorney argued that the Eagle Creek Trail was a popular hiking spot in the Columbia River Gorge due to its beauty. During one of Stephen's preliminary court hearings, the medical examiner who conducted Ronda's autopsy after she fell from Eagle Creek revealed that all of Ronda's injuries were confined to the area below her waist. This crucial finding played a key role in shaping Stephen's defense strategy, as it enabled his team to propose the theory that Ronda had taken her own life. The defense team argued that the force of the impact from hitting the ground was responsible for Ronda's broken pelvis, and that the evidence suggested she had fallen feet first, rather than tumbling head over heels, which would have indicated that she had not been pushed. In addition to presenting evidence about Ronda's injuries, the defense team also wanted to use notes from her therapy sessions as evidence. These notes showed that Ronda was depressed, but she never mentioned wanting to kill herself. In fact, Ronda had described her relationship with Stephen as feeling loveless. Stephen's defense team argued that Ronda's depression and her description of their relationship suggested that she might have chosen to end her own life. By presenting this evidence, they hoped to raise doubts about the prosecution's claim that Stephen had pushed Ronda, causing the injuries that ultimately led to her death. Stephen later stated that Ronda had been depressed and had attempted to take her own life multiple times before they even met. However, Ronda's family denied these claims, accusing Stephen of lying. They believed that Stephen was trying to shift the blame onto Ronda to distract from his own role in her murder. According to Stephen, Ronda had struggled with drug abuse since she was 12, and he claimed that she had experimented with various substances. However, the medical examiner's report only found small amounts of marijuana and prescription medication for anxiety and depression, which Ronda was taking due to postpartum struggles. Disturbing evidence came to light during the preliminary hearings, revealing Stephen's involvement. It was discovered that Stephen had been in a romantic relationship with Melanie, Ronda's 16-year-old sister. This revelation raised concerns, as Stephen was in his 30s and Melanie was still a minor. The prosecution argued that Stephen's inappropriate relationship with Melanie could have been a motive for Ronda's murder, as Ronda had found out about her husband's secret actions, leading to tension and a possible reason to kill her. After Stephen was arrested for Ronda's murder, he was charged with 2 counts of third-degree sexual assault and 3 counts of third-degree sodomy regarding his relationship with Melanie, his girlfriend, and Ronda's sister. While awaiting trial for Ronda's murder in 2005, Stephen admitted to 2 counts of sexual abuse. He later claimed that he was pressured into making the admission and that it was false, stating that the only reason he pleaded guilty was to regain custody of his daughter. However, the prosecution maintained that Stephen's relationship with Melanie lasted over 4 years. Later, Stephen confessed to having a sexual relationship with Melanie, Ronda's teenage sister. In a text message, Ronda called Stephen a piece of garbage and accused him of using Melanie to hurt her. Ronda's mother testified that Ronda knew Stephen was trying to create a rift between her and Melanie, and that Ronda loved her sister and wanted to mend their relationship. The state argued that Ronda and Stephen's relationship was troubled. The court was presented with evidence of Stephen's deviant sexual past. 6 months after Ronda's death, Stephen was arrested and charged with 5 counts of sexual abuse for allegedly touching a 13-year-old girl. Initially, Stephen denied the allegations, but later admitted to sending the girl a sexually suggestive text message and a shirtless photo, acknowledging the inappropriate nature of his actions and pleading guilty to 1 count of sexual harassment. During Stephen's preliminary hearings, the state submitted photos of Ronda's bruised back, taken by Ronda herself, as evidence. Ronda's best friend testified that she had witnessed the couple fighting on multiple occasions and frequently heard them arguing in the background. Additionally, Stephen's ex-wife took the stand, alleging that he had attempted to suffocate her and throw her over the railing of their apartment in November 2003, although he was not charged with a crime related to this incident and denied the claims. Ronda's family is convinced that her boyfriend, Stephen, is responsible for her death, believing he murdered her to collect on a life insurance policy he had recently increased. Ronda's mother has expressed her suspicions, pointing out that Stephen had lost a large amount of money through day trading the previous year and was struggling financially. Moreover, all who knew Ronda can attest that she loved her 9-month-old daughter deeply and would never have taken her own life. Despite the lack of physical evidence linking Stephen to Ronda's murder, the state still believed he was responsible for pushing her off the trail at Eagle Creek. However, the weakness of the case led to a compromise between the state and the defense. Stephen pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of criminally negligent homicide, and in return, he received credit for the time he had already spent in custody awaiting trial. He was sentenced to 3 years of parole, after which his ankle monitor was removed and he was finally released. Ronda's family and friends were unhappy with the outcome, feeling that Stephen should have faced more severe consequences for his actions. At the sentencing hearing, Ronda's sister delivered a powerful impact statement, conveying her anger and frustration towards Stephen and emphasizing the devastating impact he had on their family. Ronda's mother also spoke, expressing her confusion and frustration, and struggling to understand how Stephen could have taken her daughter's life, leaving their family in shattered remains. In a 2018 interview, Stephen made a shocking claim about Ronda's death. He said that when he hiked down Eagle Creek Trail on the day she fell, Ronda was still alive. Stephen then asked the interviewer if killing a suffering war buddy could be considered a justified killing, even though it would still be considered a homicide. Although Stephen did not directly admit to harming Ronda, his comments hinted that he might have been involved in her death. In 2017, Ronda's mother filed for Social Security survivor benefits for her infant granddaughter, stating that the child lived with her and promising to use the benefits only for the baby's care. However, the state accused Ronda's mother of misusing the benefits from April 2010 to December 2014, while Ronda was still alive. Ronda's mother was charged with stealing nearly $40,000 in government funds over a 5-year period. Her defense team argued that she committed the crime to prevent her son-in-law, Stephen, from gaining custody of Ronda's daughter. They claimed that her actions were motivated by a desire to protect her granddaughter from exploitation. According to the defense, Ronda's mother had struggled with depression, which worsened after her daughter's death. To cope with her grief, she turned to marijuana, which clouded her judgment and impaired her ability to think clearly. Ronda's mother, 53, pleaded guilty to the theft and was sentenced to 1 month in a halfway house and 3 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay back the stolen benefits, totaling $39,100. Ronda and Stephen's daughter had been in foster care since October 2015, when the Department of Human Services took custody of her. This decision was made after Stephen pleaded guilty to sexually abusing a 13-year-old girl. As a result, an Oregon court terminated his parental rights, although Stephen appealed this decision. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Brown. Jennifer and Antonio's friendship began while they were working together. They were once business partners, collaborating on common projects. However, even after Antonio decided to become a chef, their bond did not lose its strength. Their friendship grew beyond business and became more than just a working relationship. Their friendship took on a special significance because of Jennifer's 8-year-old son, Noah, who has autism. Antonio had always given his friend genuine support and helped her in caring for Noah. Their children were also friends, and they often spent time together. And when the children's games would run late, Noah would stay overnight at the Antonio house. Jennifer Brown, born in 1979, was an active and vibrant woman. She was always smiling and exuded an energy that positively impacted everyone around her. Friends and relatives often wondered how she managed to balance so many responsibilities and remain active, but her true calling was motherhood. The identity of the father of her son was unknown, but this situation did not overshadow their lives. On the contrary, it made Jennifer stronger, especially after Noah was diagnosed with autism in early childhood. Caring for her young son, Jennifer became a reliable support and best friend to him. Mother and son were inseparable friends, spending a lot of time together, sharing moments of joy and supporting each other during difficult times. This close friendship between them evoked feelings of tenderness and admiration from all who knew their family. The people of the small town witnessed their closeness and adored this family for their cheerfulness and genuine kindness. Unfortunately, none of them could have anticipated what would happen to Jennifer one winter day on January 3, 2023. She disappeared without a trace. On the morning of January 4, 2023, the local Limerick Township Police Department received a disturbing call from Antonio Blair Watts Richardson. He was deeply concerned about the disappearance of his close friend, even though it had been less than 24 hours since he had last seen her or heard her voice. The anxiety inside him was growing by the minute. For hours now, Antonio had tried unsuccessfully to contact Jennifer, but all his attempts had gone unanswered. This behavior was completely unlike her. She was active and responsible, always answering calls or messages, especially in matters concerning her son Noah. However, on this day, for some reason, the boy's mom did not meet him after school. The missing person's family and friends were well aware of what a devoted mother and caring woman she was. Therefore, the sudden disappearance caused serious alarm to all who knew her and left no one indifferent. Antonio's call to the police was the first step in a long and mysterious investigation that would soon engulf the entire city and shake it with its tragedy. Immediately after Antonio reported his girlfriend missing, a massive search began. Police officers, family, and friends joined forces, hoping to find any trace that might shed light on Jennifer's disappearance. It left many questions in the air, and the main one was what could have caused the caring mom to leave her son without any explanation. At 4 that afternoon, Officer Stephen Crawford of the Limerick Township Police Department went to the Brown family home to check on what was happening there. He found that her vehicle was parked by the porch, and upon entering the home, he discovered that her keys, purse, tablet, and work cell phone were still in the house. However, the officer was unable to locate Jennifer's personal cell phone. Later, when police tried to track it down, it was discovered that the phone had been turned off at 7 a.m. on January 4th and could not be traced since then. The last location the signal came from was near Lewis Road and Ridge Pike in the town of Limerick. This was the first significant lead in the investigation and a sign that something terrible had happened to Jennifer. she was reported missing, and police began investigating the case. Investigators began questioning her family, friends, and neighbors, hoping to find out if anyone had seen or heard anything at the time Jennifer disappeared. None of the young woman's loved ones or acquaintances had any information about her whereabouts. Aunt Diane Brem and Jennifer's friends, Tiffany Barron and Antonio, claimed that there was no way Jennifer would have left her son alone. This was a woman full of devotion and love for her child. All efforts made by the authorities and volunteers were fruitless, as they could not find any trace or clues as to where Jennifer might have been. Her loved ones appealed to the public through the media for any information on the possible whereabouts of her. A reward was set up, but that too was inconclusive. The case of Jennifer Brown's mysterious disappearance was just beginning to develop, leaving investigators and family with questions and anxious expectations. The police investigation began by closely examining the circumstances of that day, and Jennifer's close friend Antonio, who was the last person to see her alive that day, became a key focus. It was an ordinary January day, and Jennifer and Antonio were sitting in the cozy living room discussing life, future plans, and their children. Their children often played together, and Jennifer had asked her friend for help in picking up her son Noah from school so they could spend the evening together. This was a common arrangement among friends. Antonio, being the loyal friend he was, agreed, and after finishing their conversation, he immediately went to the school to pick up Noah. However, something strange happened at school. Noah behaved unusually and caused his teachers concern. They noticed that the boy had missed 2 doses of his medication that helped him manage his condition due to his illness. This was highly unusual, as Jennifer had always been a devoted mother, never neglecting her son's caregiving responsibilities and always being in touch with teachers if anything happened at school. The school staff tried to find out where his mom was and was told by Noah that she had gone to the grocery store and had not returned. This caused even more concern, as this behavior of a sensitive woman was very uncharacteristic. She never left her son alone. At this time, Jennifer's friend Antonio Watts also tried unsuccessfully to contact her. After not hearing back or contacting Jennifer, Antonio decided to see if she would show up to pick up her son from the bus stop. However, when the woman never showed up and concern grew by the minute, Antonio had no choice but to go to the police and report his friend missing. As time passed, no new information about the possible whereabouts of the missing woman had emerged since the investigation began. Hopes for her return were fading with each passing day. It seemed that Jennifer had disappeared without a trace and might never be found. But on January 18th, 2 weeks after her disappearance was reported, 2 employees working in a warehouse near Roseford in the neighboring municipality of Limmer Township discovered something strange. As they came out of the building to get coffee, they noticed a freshly dug hole in front of them. Upon closer inspection, they were horrified to find the body of a woman buried in a shallow grave. The workers immediately notified the police, who promptly arrived at the burial site. Upon examining the body, the police identified the young woman they had been searching for the past 2 weeks as Jennifer Brown. The sheriff called her family and informed them that the missing woman's body had been found partially buried near a warehouse in Roseford. An autopsy revealed that Jennifer's death was clearly violent. The cause of death was asphyxiation, and she had 3 broken ribs. This indicated that Jennifer had probably struggled with her killer, who had beaten her to subdue her. Now, the nature of the investigation changed. The missing person case was reclassified as a murder case. Police once again began interviewing everyone who was close to the murdered woman, including her family and friends. However, these interviews yielded no new information about the case, and the police had no suspects. It seemed as if the investigation was about to wind down, and the police had no one to follow up on. Detectives were not expecting any leads when they received a call from an unexpected source. The police asked anyone with information about Jennifer's mysterious disappearance to come forward. Jennifer's teacher responded to the call. She recalled a case that initially seemed unimportant, but after Jennifer's death, it raised serious suspicions. The teacher said that Noah had shared an important detail with her about the terrible day, January 4th, when Jennifer disappeared. Little Noah told her that when Antonio Watts picked him up from the bus stop on January 3rd, the boy noticed that among Antonio's belongings was his mom's personal cell phone. Noah recognized it immediately, as the lock screen displayed his own childhood photo. This moment turned out to be key in the investigation into the young woman's murder. Previously, investigators had already assumed that Jennifer's killer had taken her cell phone. Now, Antonio Watts became the main suspect. The police began to scrutinize the relationship between Jennifer and Antonio, and mysterious details emerged, shocking even experienced investigators. Jennifer and Antonio's friendship seemed solid and long-standing. They spent a lot of time together, knew each other well, and their families interacted with each other. However, the business side of their relationship revealed a dark history lurking beneath the mask of friendship. Antonio Watts owned a restaurant called Bird's Kitchen, which unfortunately fell into disrepair and closed in early 2022. After this, Antonio turned to his friend, Jennifer, asking her for help. In August 2022, Jennifer decided to invest in her friend's business to help him revive Bird's Kitchen in a new location. They entered into a contract that stipulated that Jennifer would provide regular financial contributions to keep the restaurant going every 6 weeks or so in order to rebuild Bird's Kitchen and get it back on the market. According to Antonio, from August through January, Jennifer turned over approximately $36,000 to him to rebuild the business. They also agreed that she would hand him another $99,000 according to their agreement. Antonio found a new location for the restaurant and was to deposit some of the money as rent, enter into a contract, and reopen Bird's Kitchen in January 2023. However, it turned out that the money provided for the investment was spent on Antonio's personal needs. The property owners with whom he had entered into the agreement drew attention to his failure to fulfill his financial obligations. Therefore, on December 26, 2022, they terminated the agreement with him. Antonio found himself in a desperate situation. He had lost not only his money, but also the opportunity to open his restaurant. The police began to suspect that in his desperation, he had decided to commit a terrible crime in an attempt to save his business. Upon closely examining the financial transaction history on Jennifer's iPad, investigators discovered 2 unauthorized transfers of $177,000 to Bird's Kitchen on January 3rd. These funds were not part of the formal agreement between Brown and Antonio. Additionally, the transfers had failed multiple times before finally succeeding after the 2-factor authentication system on the iPad was disabled, which increasingly suggested Jennifer's friend's involvement in her murder. The police then interviewed the owners of the property who had terminated their lease with Antonio. It turned out that on January 4th, the very day Antonio reported Jennifer missing, he appeared before them, saying he had the funds to enter into a lease agreement. Investigators were convinced that Antonio was the killer. However, realizing that he would never admit his guilt, they needed to gather irrefutable evidence. Their first step was to interview Antonio's wife, Tiara Taylor, and find out where Antonio was the day Jennifer disappeared. Tiara told detectives that on January 3rd, Antonio visited the Brown family around 1 p.m. and did not return home until 4:30 a.m. When he picked up Noah from the bus stop, Tiara also claimed that her husband came home only briefly and then left again around 5 p.m. and did not return until late that night. This time frame became a key point. Further investigation revealed that Antonio had spent the night with Tatiana Garrett, his mistress, and did not meet up with her until around 8 p.m. This meant that between 5 and 8 p.m., Antonio had no alibi. Based on the available evidence, detectives put together an alleged chronology of the murder. According to their version, on January 3rd, Antonio went to Jennifer's house while Noah was at school at about 1 p.m. and allegedly killed her. He then made 2 transfers of funds from the murdered woman's iPad to his account, and left to pick up Noah from the bus stop around 4 p.m. Later, he returned to Jennifer's house, dropped Noah off, and traveled back to the crime scene to dispose of the body. He took the body to a field near Rosef and buried it in a shallow grave. From there, the killer made his way to Tatiana's house, where he spent the rest of the night. Everything was carefully planned, and it would seem that the murderer might have gone unnoticed had it not been for one mistake he made, and it proved fatal. That mistake was letting Noah see his mother's cell phone. That was the key moment that led the police directly to Antonio. Law enforcement now had enough evidence to convict Antonio, but they decided to investigate further to see if he was guilty. It took the involvement of forensic experts and a specially trained dog capable of detecting cadaveric odors. First, the dog was brought to Jennifer's home so that it could memorize the woman's scent. The police then directed the dog to Antonio's car, and it instantly detected the same depressing odor. It was the last piece of evidence needed to bolster detectives' confidence in Antonio's involvement in the murder. On February 8th, after months of investigation, Antonio was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, third-degree murder, and theft. He is currently incarcerated at the Montgomery County Correctional Facility with no bail application and awaiting a preliminary hearing where he will have to answer for his horrific acts before the law. Jennifer's friends and family were on the brink of despair when they discovered her dead. But their hearts are still pierced by the pain and shock that the killer was someone they knew and trusted, someone who should have been a close friend to Jennifer and her son. Now that the killer has been identified and brought to justice, they can finally feel that justice has been served. The tragedy in Limmer Township serves as another reminder that even the most carefully planned crimes will sooner or later be solved. Meanness and inhumanity will not go unpunished, and the perpetrators will sooner or later be brought to justice before the law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. 19-year-old student Lizzy Marriott vanished on October 9, 2012. After her classes, she went home and left a note on the table. It was addressed to Tony and Becky Hanna, her uncle and aunt, where she was staying. In it, Lizzy mentioned she was going to visit a friend and would return no later than midnight. However, neither that day nor the next did she come back. Later, her car was found in the campus parking lot. It seemed she disappeared without a trace. As time passed, the search for Lizzy turned into a search for her body. The police uncovered some details of her tragic end, once her openness and friendliness had backfired on her. Tony and Becky welcomed Lizzy into their home while she studied at the University of New Hampshire to help her save on living expenses. Lizzy had a strong interest in marine animals and was pursuing a career in marine biology. In 2012, she moved to Chester, leaving her parents in Massachusetts, but they remained in close contact despite the distance. Lizzy's gentle and kind-hearted nature endeared her to everyone, and her aunt fondly remembered how she would announce her arrival home, bringing joy to the household. Lizzy embraced her new life and looked forward to what the future held. During her free time, Lizzy worked at Target, where she quickly earned the respect of her colleagues. It was there that she met Kate McDonald, an 18-year-old, and the two formed a strong bond, often spending time together after work. When Kate invited Lizzy to visit again, Lizzy agreed without hesitation. On October 9th, several friends gathered to spend the evening together. They planned to have dinner and watch a movie. However, their solitude was interrupted when 30-year-old Seth Mazzaglia, Kate's boyfriend, joined them. She believed it was more fun together. Plus, her new acquaintances were interesting personalities involved in theater, and Seth had graduated from the same university as Lizzy, but in theater arts. Despite working as a consultant at an electronics store, Seth had diverse experiences. He trained as an emergency medical technician, held a black belt in karate, and even taught martial arts. There was plenty to talk about. The evening promised to be engaging and end well. Yet, After entering the young people's apartment, Lizzy did not come out again. When Lizzy didn't return by the promised time, her relatives decided to wait until the next evening. They thought she might have stayed overnight at a friend's place and gone directly to university from there. However, when she still did not show up on October 10th, her aunt and uncle became worried and contacted her parents. It turned out they also had no information about her whereabouts. Following this disturbing news, Lizzy's mother and father got in their car and headed towards Chester. On their way, they reported their daughter's disappearance to both the police and various acquaintances of Lizzy's, who promptly joined the search efforts. The investigation started with questioning everyone who knew Lizzy. Her relatives could not provide concrete information regarding her plans that day. However, through her friends' input, this mystery began unraveling. Nate McKyle mentioned he knew where she might be, at Kate McDonald's place, but upon asking Kate about it, she denied having seen Lizzy. Detectives took note of Nate's statements and began checking this new lead while noticing that there were no activities in Lizzy's bank accounts and her phone was switched off since then too. Initial suspicions like a possible accident were ruled out when they found Lizzy's car just a few days later. Concurrently, Bob and Melissa Marriott announced a $10,000 reward for any valid information regarding their daughter's location. After speaking with Lizzy's friends and colleagues, investigators stumbled upon some revealing insights about Kate and Seth Mazzaglia. The couple wasn't quite what they portrayed themselves publicly as being, soon after which Seth Mazzaglia got arrested. Lizzy was very sociable and compassionate, while Kate seemed reserved and sometimes rude. The reason for their close relationship remained a mystery. Long-term employees at the store mentioned that this wasn't always the case with McDonald. She reportedly changed significantly after starting a relationship with Seth. Her former cheerfulness and lightness vanished. It was later revealed she had limited communication with her relatives, who disapproved of her new boyfriend. Suspicion surrounded Seth, who appeared antisocial. The couple began dating when Kate was 17. After she turned 18, they moved in together to Mel's apartment in Dover, New Hampshire. The police took special interest in the couple but found nothing remarkable in their databases. When officers examined their online profiles, they uncovered details about their personal lives. Seth and Kate were involved in unconventional relationships, as shown by McDonald's post on a specific website under the name Miss Scarlet Vampire Actress. In the post, she mentioned that she and her partner were looking for a live-in slave to take care of household chores, cooking, and be available for intimacy whenever needed. Their dynamic was described as dominant-submissive, with the dominant partner making decisions and the submissive partner following them. The pictures shared in the post had a Gothic style. It was clear that their relationship focused on humiliation and obedience rather than love or respect. The couple practiced BDSM, with Seth as the dominant and Kate as the submissive. Given this information, detectives started suspecting their involvement in Lizzy's disappearance. On October 12th, they summoned the young couple for questioning, simultaneously but separately, a strategy that favored the investigation. For 2 hours, Kate insisted she hadn't seen Lizzy on October 9th before clamming up entirely. Meanwhile, Seth proved more forthcoming during his interrogation finds. He denied his friend's words, stating that on that day, Marriott was indeed at their place. However, a tragedy occurred. Initially, everything seemed fine. They watched a movie and played strip poker. After that, they engaged in a threesome. According to him, no one objected to intimacy and everyone was morally prepared. During the process, he tied the girls with ropes. But something went wrong at some point. Lizzy accidentally died. In a state of shock and fearing misunderstanding, he and Kate took the girl's body to Pierce Island and threw it into the Piscataqua River. Then they went home. After an 11-hour interrogation, Mala accompanied the police to the designated place where he vividly demonstrated how he got there and threw the body off the cliff. On October 13th, the young man was charged with murder. The news of their daughter's death was devastating for her parents. Lizzy Marriott mentioned she had a feeling about it, but didn't want to believe it until the last moment. That same day, a candlelight vigil was held in memory of Lizzy. Her father thanked those who attended and said that today's prayers would help Lizzy find peace. Her friend Nate, who actively participated in the search efforts, remembered that she always told funny stories to lift spirits or comfort people during tough times. He wistfully noted that perhaps she would have found something reassuring to say in this case as well. The girl's parents did not believe Mala's story. They insisted that their daughter valued her relationship greatly and would never betray her beloved Brittany. They prayed for God's help and urged the police to locate their daughter's body quickly for a proper burial. The search efforts continued daily with volunteers assisting the authorities, and even a private investigator joined in. However, the river where Liz was last seen had strong currents, leading to speculation that her body might have been carried into the Atlantic Ocean some time ago. The investigation progressed as they combed through Mel's apartment and beyond. It should be noted that the young couple's home was in a chaotic and disorganized state. Detectives also discovered Seth's interest in occult practices and black magic. Since no concrete evidence was found in the apartment, forensic experts expanded their search to the surrounding area. In one of the nearby trash containers, they found a bag of belongings, some black leather gloves, a sweatshirt, and men's underwear. During examination, it was determined that the underwear had DNA traces from both Seth and Lizzy. This confirmed their intimate relationship. The sweatshirt belonged to Lizzy and was identified by her family. But what puzzled everyone were those leather gloves. Why dispose of such an item if it was just part of a love game? Not everything Mel said was true. He seemed capable of confusing desire with reality. However, Kat McDonald's statement shed light on the situation. The girl finally broke her silence on October 17th and shared what happened. She admitted that on October 9th, Lizzy came over to her place later, joined by Seth. Initially, they watched a movie together and then played strip poker. As the game progressed, things escalated towards intimacy. According to Kat, everyone's desires were mutual. It all began with kisses and tenderness until Seth proposed tying Lizzy up with ropes. She agreed willingly. Kat even diagrammed how Seth did it step by step. Everything seemed fine until suddenly Lizzy had a seizure. She began to suffocate and moments later lost consciousness. When Seth and Kat lifted her up, she wasn't breathing anymore. The whole incident unfolded so quickly and unexpectedly that McDonald insisted no one could be blamed. It was an unfortunate accident. A pivotal element in the investigation emerged from the testimony of an unexpected witness. One day, a young woman visited the police station, asserting that she possessed crucial information regarding Lizzy Marriott's case. She requested to speak with the detectives leading the inquiry. During this conversation, she identified herself as Catherine Fish, the ex-girlfriend of Seth Mazzaglia. It became evident through their discussion what Catherine was hinting at. Seth might be capable of murder. She recounted that he once confessed to her a fantasy where he took someone's life. For context, let's start from the beginning. Catherine and Seth met about a decade ago. Initially, he appeared attentive and caring, often wooing her with flowers and gifts. His charm and engaging conversations quickly enamored Catherine. During their first intimate encounter, she found out about his interest in BDSM. Initially, she was fine with these new experiences as long as he stayed in control. However, Seth soon started showing excessive cruelty and dominance, disliking being contradicted or stopped. At times, he would share his thoughts and fantasies with Catherine. During one of these talks, she heard a disturbing confession that made her realize he could be dangerous. To confirm her fear, there was an incident where he tightly grabbed her throat and refused to let go despite her pleas. This incident shattered her illusions about him completely. After moving to a new city with Seth, she felt isolated with no way to escape, as she knew no one in the new area and was financially dependent on him. So, she continued living with him while waiting for an opportunity to flee. Catherine also disclosed that over time, Seth grew bored with her in bed and suggested involving a third partner to spice things up. Different girls were occasionally brought into their home, but never stayed long until Mazzaglia insisted on finding a permanent girlfriend. This situation turned Catherine's life into a nightmare. She confessed that Seth had instilled so much fear in her that she didn't dare attempt an escape. Finally, after mustering courage, she decided to run away a few months later. Against all odds, Fish traveled 1,000 miles to reach her parents' house. But that's another story. She never saw her ex-boyfriend again. In May 2014, Seth Mazzaglia stood trial. The prosecution claimed that he was not only guilty of intentional harm, but also of taking advantage of others. Several individuals testified against him shortly before the trial. One of them was Kat McDonald. 2 months after Lizzy's death, she too was arrested and held in custody, facing charges of obstructing justice and investigation. During her time in custody, she had ample opportunity to reflect on the events and understand who she was initially covering for. While in prison, she and Seth exchanged letters actively. The pair fantasized about fleeing to a country without extradition laws, getting married, and starting a family. Their escape plan hit a roadblock in the winter of 2012 when Seth convinced his soon-to-be-released cellmate Ryan Bachman to assist them. Mazzaglia granted Bachman access to his bank account. The plan was for Bachman to withdraw money, buy drugs, sell them, and use the profits to fund their escape by purchasing weapons, cars, explosives, and a boat. However, Bachman misused the money for his own purposes, leading to authorities discovering their plan. Following this revelation, Seth abandoned their escape scheme and sent Kat a letter proposing a meeting in the afterlife. He genuinely believed that death wasn't the end of life. Perhaps Seth subtly hinted at ending her life as well. In any case, McDonald's thoughts cleared as time passed. When the prosecutor's office presented her with a favorable deal in 2014, she accepted without hesitation. As per the agreement, McDonald had to disclose the events of October 9th in the apartment. In exchange for telling the truth, her potential 20-year prison term was reduced to 3 years, a generous offer given the circumstances known from the subsequent investigation. The girl confessed she was greatly afraid of Seth and obeyed him unquestioningly. He slowly broke down her will and took away her freedom. Not long before the tragedy, he messaged her, insisting she find a third person urgently because he didn't want to be alone while Kat was absent. The girl had theater tours planned for the next 10 days, but McDonald couldn't substitute for her. Over time, Mazzaglia's messages turned from commands to threats, warning of serious consequences if she didn't comply. At the very least, Kat needed to bring one of her friends so that he could carry out his plan. To meet this demand, Kat invited Lizzy. Lizzy readily agreed, as she had been to Kat's place before and trusted her. McDonald kept silent about the fact they wouldn't be alone to prevent any doubt from Lizzy. Seth found the potential partner appealing. He had seen her pictures previously and eagerly anticipated their meeting. On October 9th at 9 p.m., Marriott arrived at Mazzagalia's apartment. Initially, Kat and Lizzy spent time chatting until Seth joined them. He was in good spirits, joked often, and made the girls feel at ease, making the evening cheerful. Later, the group began watching a movie. While watching, Seth suggested they play strip poker, lowering the lights to create a cozy atmosphere. The game proceeded casually, but Lizzy kept losing and ended up in her underwear. In a subsequent losing hand, Seth proposed that Lizzy kiss Kat. She firmly declined, stating she was already in another relationship. After some time had passed and tensions had escalated, Seth proposed to Marriott that they spend some time alone together. She firmly declined. Reacting to her response with apparent calmness but underlying aggression, Seth went to his room, put on black leather gloves, and retrieved a rope. Upon returning from his room and positioning himself behind an unsuspecting Lizzy, he placed the weapon around her neck. She didn't even have a chance to scream before he strangled her without hesitation. Following this brutal act of murder, Seth proceeded to violate her lifeless body, all while his girlfriend sat nearby in shocked silence. Later, Cat explained that fear had paralyzed her from intervening. She was afraid of becoming the next victim, so she opted not to assist the poor girl. Around 1 in the morning, the couple wrapped Lizzy's body in a tarp and placed it in a suitcase. They carried it to Lizzy's car and drove to Pierce Island by the river. There, they lifted the suitcase onto an observation deck, removed the deceased, and threw her off the cliff. Afterward, they cleaned up in the car together, returned to campus, and left Lizzy's car in the parking lot. The couple then walked 10 miles home. Cat later explained that she was terrified by the events and was in a state of shock. She chose not to testify against Seth out of fear that he would easily eliminate her. During the trial, Cat often cried, but no tears fell from her eyes. This led many in the courtroom to question her sincerity. Some believed she was a skilled actress capable of feigning distress effortlessly. Seth's lawyer noticed this and suggested she could adapt to any role professionally. The defense argued that Lizzy's death was accidental during intimacy. While no one disputed that Seth and Cat disposed of her body afterwards, McDonald's defense team argued that Cat had been under significant pressure for a prolonged period, affecting her mental well-being. They claimed Seth had isolated her from her loved ones and friends while consistently pressuring her into intimate acts. On the other hand, the prosecution focused on deliberate murder, highlighting a pair of gloves found at the scene. They believed Mazzaglia was aware of his intentions with Lizzy and wore gloves purposefully to protect himself and conceal any evidence of his actions. Considering these details, his actions were viewed as far from accidental. Prosecution witnesses, Roberta Gherkin and Paul Hickok, who were acquaintances of the couple, testified in court. It was revealed that Seth contacted them at 10:49 p.m., shortly after the murder of Marriott. Seth asked for their help and requested them to arrive after 11 p.m. When they reached Mella's apartment, they were met with a disturbing sight. Seth was seated on the bed, beside a girl dressed in lingerie. When Paul inquired about the situation, Seth repeatedly mentioned, "This time things went too far," in a distressed manner. Roberta discovered Cat on the kitchen floor, sitting in a fetal position and rocking back and forth. The couple instructed someone to call an ambulance before leaving swiftly, choosing not to involve themselves further or contact the authorities to avoid additional complications. On August 14, 2014, Seth Mazzaglia was convicted of first-degree murder by strangulation and conspiracy to commit a crime. He, a 32-year-old man, faced a life sentence with no chance of parole. Meanwhile, Cat McDonald, aged 20, received a 3-year imprisonment term as per an agreement. She was reportedly released in 2016 and has maintained a low profile since then, without any identifiable social media presence under her own name. Speculations suggest she may have reunited with her parents. Lizzy Marriott's body was never recovered, preventing her parents from laying her to rest. Instead, they erected a small memorial bench by the lake in their hometown in her honor. Bob and Melissa Marriott believed that the sentence given to Lizzy's former friend was too lenient. While the offender was punished, they opine that it does not equate to justice, as their daughter is deceased and can never return. The case of Antonia Barra turned a holiday into an absolute nightmare. Alcohol, especially in large quantities, can truly be detrimental, impacting both the body and mind adversely. It's no secret that an individual in a state of severe intoxication becomes highly susceptible and can easily fall prey to robbers, fraudsters, rapists, and murderers. This vulnerability is particularly pronounced for women. What is also concerning is that criminals often attempt to justify their heinous actions by claiming intoxication or placing the blame on the victim. Consequently, many individuals who experience violence choose to remain silent, struggling with their pain and solitude. Some find ways to move forward, but for others, this weight becomes too heavy to bear. Antonia Barra's story exemplifies the devastating impact of silence and societal condemnation. It illustrates how an individual who caused immense suffering to numerous young women could go unpunished for too long. Her case shook the entire nation of Chile, sparking public outrage and leading to mass protests. It also highlighted flaws in the criminal system that allowed rapists' actions to be justified. The widespread response ultimately led to the removal of a dangerous criminal from society, thereby protecting other potential victims. Regarding Antonia Barra, she was born on December 3, 1999, in the city of Temuco, which is the administrative center of the same-named district in Chile. She was the youngest of 5 children in a well-off family headed by Alejandro and Marcela Barra. Her siblings included 2 older brothers named Sebastian and Ignacio, and 2 sisters named Catalina and Carla. Among them all, Antonia shared an especially close bond with her sister Catalina. They were best friends and confidantes. Her parents invested significantly in the education and comprehensive development of their children. They were involved in sports and music activities, and all attended prestigious colleges following high school graduation. As the youngest child, Antonia received a lot of love and attention from her parents without compromising her academic performance. She excelled at school with aspirations of pursuing a career in tourism and exploring different parts of the world. In conclusion, Antonia Barra's legacy highlights critical societal issues regarding violence and justice, while pushing for meaningful reform within legal systems to protect vulnerable populations effectively. In 2015, a 15-year-old named Antonia met Martin Pradenas on social media. Both resided in the same city, with Martin living not far from Antonia. He was 8 years her senior and at that time already divorced with a child. Details about his early life are sparse. Born in February 1992 in Temuco, Martin was the second of 3 children born to Ivan Pradenas and Paula Dare. At the age of 20, he impregnated a schoolmate and married her to avoid scandal and penalties. This marriage dissolved shortly after their child's birth. Communication between Martin and Antonia occurred from 2015 to 2017 via social networks. The relationship remained purely platonic. Post-high school graduation, Antonia attended university in another city where she pursued studies in the travel industry. This transition ushered in new friends and hobbies for her. Martin faded from her thoughts. Antonia returned home only during vacations and holidays, but maintained regular contact with her family. At university, Antonia formed a close friendship with Consuela Urbe, becoming nearly inseparable companions. She also dated Rodrigo Aguad for about a year before they decided to take a break from their relationship in September 2019 at the start of the new semester. Following this breakup, Antonia felt distressed and sought distraction from her emotional turmoil. Coincidentally, an upcoming Chilean national holiday promised an extended weekend filled with various events. Seizing this opportunity, she and Consuela opted to attend an electronic music festival held in the scenic town of Pucón to unwind and rejuvenate. They traveled in Consuela's car, taking 3 additional university friends with them. In that city, there was a summer house owned by close friends of the Barra family. Though the owners were out of the city at the time, they kindly offered Antonia and her friend to stay there, informing them about the spare key's location. Upon arrival, their companions went their separate ways, while Ant and her friend settled into a large and cozy house for the weekend. On the evening of September 18th, during a walk around the city, Antonia accidentally encountered Martin. They engaged in conversation and discovered that Martin was also in town for the festival with his friends. They were staying in a rented house a couple of miles from the city center. The two had a pleasant chat and decided to meet the next day at a party scheduled to take place in one of the popular nightclubs. In a phone conversation with her parents, Antonia shared her plans. Her father sternly advised her to avoid excessive drinking and behave prudently. Laughing it off, she assured him everything would be fine. The next day, she and her friends spent hours preparing for the party, choosing outfits, applying makeup, and then headed to the club. Before leaving, they shared a bottle of wine and then took a taxi to the club. Once there, they ordered another bottle of champagne at the bar and enjoyed it together before heading to the dance floor. Around midnight, Martin and his friends arrived, and quickly found Antonia. By then, both were already quite intoxicated, but continued drinking and dancing. Consuela mentioned trying to dissuade her friend from drinking more, but Antonia didn't listen. At some point, Consuela lost track of Barra and began searching for her. She found her about half an hour later in another room with Martin. By this time, Antonia was heavily intoxicated and could barely stand. There, Consuela saw their classmate Benjamin Morales and asked him for assistance in taking Antonia home. However, Antonia resisted vehemently. She insisted on staying because the night was young. A few moments later, she felt unwell. Friends escorted Barra outside for fresh air before returning inside once more. Towards morning, feeling weary, Consuela approached again, suggesting they leave together as she needed rest. Yet Antonia chose to stay behind and continue partying. Urbe eventually abandoned efforts to persuade her friend any further. She took a taxi home alone and immediately went to bed upon arrival. What was meant to be a fun night had devolved into chaos. Around 6 in the morning, Benjamin observed Martin escorting Antonia out of the club. Martin was hugging and holding her as she was swaying from side to side. According to him, she seemed disoriented, and Pradenas exploited this situation. They lingered near the entrance because Antonia felt unwell. They waited for her condition to improve a bit. Eventually, Martin's friends joined them, suggesting they continue their party at a rented house. They called a taxi for transportation, but Barra and Pradenas decided to walk due to Antonia's sickness and confusion. Their journey was captured by surveillance cameras. The footage revealed that Martin was leading a visibly intoxicated student who attempted to free herself from his hold. Along the way, they stopped at a 24-hour supermarket where Martin chose to purchase beer. The store was empty. At one point, he made an attempt to kiss Antonia. However, she pushed him away and turned aside. She clearly felt uncomfortable, but couldn't leave or resist effectively. In this scenario, Pradenas had the upper hand and continued to guide Antonia. By approximately 8 in the morning, they arrived at the rented house. The friends in the living room observed that Antonia appeared visibly upset. Yet due to her significant intoxication level, she couldn't articulate her distress effectively. Meanwhile, Martin persistently hugged her and attempted to kiss her repeatedly. Given that all other friends were also heavily intoxicated, no one intervened. Soon after, the pair moved into one of the bedrooms where Martin assaulted Antonia while she was still dazed and confused about what was happening around her. Despite trying to resist and asking him to stop several times, Martin ignored her protests completely. When festivities concluded, he rejoined his friends in the living room to continue celebrating. Antonia, however, remained in the bedroom. At around 9 a.m., she called Benjamin, desperately asking him to take her home. Benjamin could barely understand her because her speech was slurred. She was being continuously and couldn't clearly convey what had happened or where she was. Concerned, Benjamin informed Consuela about the call, suggesting Antonia might be in trouble and need assistance. Consuela then contacted Antonia herself. With significant effort, she managed to ascertain Antonia's location and went to retrieve her. Upon arriving at the location, she encountered Martin and demanded an explanation of his actions. Martin merely smiled and claimed everything was consensual. Inside one of the rooms, Consuela found Antonia in a distressing state, crying and desperate to leave immediately. Without hesitation, they headed home, where Antonia took a shower, despite Consuela's advice not to wash away potential evidence and to contact the police right away. However, Antonia insisted that no one should find out about what had happened. Later that afternoon, she phoned her parents, attempting to mask any signs that something was amiss. The following morning, the girl and her friends drove back to their student dormitory. Faced with depression, bullying, and a desperate act, Antonia hoped to quickly forget the nightmare she experienced in Pukan and to resume her previous life. She attended classes and spoke with friends, but only Consuela truly recognized her mental state. Sadly, Consuela's efforts were insufficient to prevent Antonia from slipping into severe depression. Antonia chose not to discuss the incident or file a police report, fearing public exposure of her ordeal. Despite her silence, rumors spread swiftly, becoming embellished with fabricated intimate details created by gossipers behind Antonia's back. People whispered, pointed at her, and laughed. A fellow student even confronted her publicly about the rumors. The breaking point for Antonia was receiving a call from her ex-boyfriend Rodrigo, whom she still loved and hoped to reconcile with. During the phone conversation, Aguad repeated all the rumors he had heard and coldly informed Antonia he no longer wanted to see or meet with her again. Though she cried and tried to explain that everything happening was staged, a ruse, Rodrigo responded with harsh words. He swore at her, insulted her character, and then abruptly ended the call. For Antonia, this conversation dealt an insurmountable emotional blow. On Saturday, October 12, 2019, Antonia visited her parents' house to spend time with her family. Relatives noticed a sadness in her eyes, yet she persistently claimed everything was fine. That evening, she posted a few childhood photos on her social network profile and included a melancholic message. The next day, after the family had dinner together, Antonia went to her room on the third floor of the house and stayed there. Approximately an hour later, her sister Catalina, with whom she had always been very close, checked on her. Antonia expressed a desire to sleep, asked Catalina to turn off the light and leave her alone. As Catalina left the room, she told Antonia that she loved her. A couple of hours passed before their mother, Marcela, went up to inform Antonia that dinner was ready. She knocked several times but received no response. Upon entering the room, she initially thought Antonia was asleep. However, when she touched her hand, she realized that Antonia had passed away. Marcela screamed for help. Everyone in the house rushed into the room. They immediately called an ambulance and tried to revive Antonia before medical professionals arrived. Unfortunately, their efforts were in vain. It was later determined that Antonia had taken a lethal dose of sleeping pills in an apparent decision to end her life. The investigation and initial attempts to hold the offender accountable were an immense shock to Antonia's family and friends, largely because many were unaware of her troubled emotional state. Barra's parents resolved to speak with their daughter's friends and classmates. They wanted to understand what had transpired. The rumors and gossip they uncovered were deeply distressing. Consuela offered insights into the situation, sharing all she knew. However, this wasn't sufficient for the parents. Hence, they decided to hire the best private detective in town to reconstruct the crime and gather evidence necessary for bringing the perpetrator to justice. Furthermore, Alejandro took it upon himself to publicize the case. Leveraging his connections, he organized a press conference where he disclosed, before numerous cameras, that his daughter had been forcefully taken and bullied, a trauma she could not endure. He emphasized that the individual responsible was still at large. The detective successfully pieced together the sequence of events from that tragic night and secured testimonies from several witnesses willing to testify in court. Among these witnesses were Consuela, Benjamin, and a few other university students. The Barra family made an appeal to the court, urging that Martin be arrested and face consequences for his actions. However, police officers determined that the evidence provided wasn't sufficient to detain Pradenas. He maintained that everything happened by mutual consent, although he did admit that both parties were under the influence of alcohol. Additionally, the victim had not contacted the police. Martin stayed free, and soon he and his family filed a lawsuit against the Barra family. They accused them of defamation, harassment, and revealing their personal data and information. According to Martin's family, Antonia's relatives had slandered their son and brother. Pradenas also opted to hold a press conference to present their side publicly. They claimed they were victims too, stating that Martin had been slandered, his honor damaged, and his reputation ruined. Pradenas alleged that Barra disclosed their home address, phone numbers, and social media details, which led to Martin and his family receiving daily insults and death threats anonymously. They reiterated that Martin's guilt hadn't been proven and insisted everything occurred with mutual consent. Furthermore, they expressed readiness to defend Martin's case in court with full support from his family members. It's quite unexpected, but after the statement, the police decided to support the Pradenas family. This shift made Antonia's relatives hold back from negative remarks about them and avoid sharing personal information. For the family, this was a significant setback. Despite this, they kept pushing for justice with public backing. Victims who had stayed quiet since Antonia's case gathered widespread attention. Soon, 8 more girls went to the police within a month. They claimed they had also faced harassment and violence from Martin, but had kept silent out of fear of judgment and scorn. One victim was just 13 years old when assaulted. As more girls who had suffered from Martin's illegal actions began contacting authorities one by one, he was finally taken into custody. He was arrested in June 2020 and sent to Tomoko City Prison under suspicion of assaults committed between 2011 and 2019. However, less than a month later, Martin's lawyer ensured that his client was released on his own recognizance for the duration of the investigation. Additionally, several lawsuits from the injured girls were rejected due to the statute of limitations of the crime, raising the likelihood that they would not be considered. Out of the 8 appeals, the court only registered 2 cases. The news of Martin's release and the dismissal of the victims' claims sparked public outrage. A wave of protests and rallies swept across the country, with thousands demanding justice in the streets. Responding to the public outcry, the prosecutor's office initiated a review of the case and called for a change in the suspect's measure of restraint, advocating for his return to custody. Simultaneously, the statute of limitations was lifted for all cases of violence committed by Pradenas. Trial and sentencing occurred in February 2021. During this time, the suspect's messages on social networks, where he boasted of his actions to his friends, were exposed. It was discovered that Martin kept the underwear of his victims at home as trophies. Among these items were the underwear of victims who had previously appealed to the court, as well as an item belonging to Antonia. On August 26, 2021, the defendant was charged with 9 crimes against sexual integrity, 3 of which involved victims under the age of 18 at the time. Once again, the Barra family appealed to the public, urging them not to remain silent about the violence and to bring those responsible to justice. The hearings for the case began in June 2022, allowing Martin's lawyers time to prepare thoroughly. They presented witness statements and recordings from surveillance cameras, indicating that Antonia willingly accompanied the defendant and did not resist him. The defense also questioned the testimonies of other victims. However, in August 2022, the court found Martin guilty of 8 crimes against sexual integrity and of driving Antonia to a nervous breakdown, resulting in her passing away. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Pradenas, along with his legal team, immediately filed an appeal. On December 29th, the Supreme Court appointed a new trial. In March 2023, Martin's case was transferred to public defense, where he maintained his plea of not guilty, shifting blame onto Antonia for the events that unfolded. However, on July 7, 2023, the defendant was found guilty again, but the 20-year sentence previously imposed on him was reduced to 17 years. This reduction took into account the 3 years that the defendant had already spent in prison, leaving him with only 14 years left to serve. Antonia's family expressed their dissatisfaction with this decision. In an official press release issued by the girl's father, it was noted that no punishment could ever bring back their daughter and sister to them. While the legal battles were ongoing, Antonia's family, along with other victims affected by Martin's actions, turned to public figures to advocate for women's rights. Collaboratively, they worked to amend the criminal code, specifically focusing on paragraphs related to sexual offenses. Their objective was to safeguard the rights of victims of harassment and sexual violence. This initiative was named the Antonia Barra Law and proposed the abolition of limitations for crimes of an intimate nature, as well as an increase in the sentence for a perpetrator if a victim's life ended as a result of the assault. Perhaps only in movies can women be assassins or hired soldiers. In real life, 8 out of 10 criminals are men, according to statistics. If women do commit violent acts, they usually do so as accomplices or instigators. Alongside the elderly, disabled, and minors, women often appear as victims. They differ from men not only physiologically, but also psychologically. The behavior of the male half of humanity is aggressive and provocative, unlike that of women. Women are more gentle, emotional. They enter a state of hypnosis more easily, are more quickly and strongly affected by anesthetics and psychoactive substances, are more prone to depression, and are more susceptible to deceit and manipulation. A woman is always guided by love, compassion, creation. However, their aspirations are not always shared by the partners they choose for life. This leads to a confrontation of two principles, often destructive for the weaker party in the relationship. Whenever something extraordinary happens, such as a disappearance or a crime against life, the entire city or even the country empathetically follows the developments, especially if the crime is publicized and the potential criminal shows no remorse for their actions. This is a story about another mysterious crime against a young woman that shook Orange Beach, Alabama, USA, on the calendar May 19, 2016. The police chief informed Gary Bardwell, the father of the missing Jessie, of the long-awaited news. "I'm sorry, sir," he began. "Today will be a difficult day for your family. Unfortunately, we do not expect to find your daughter alive, but we know where she might be." A team of detectives along with FBI agents set out for a remote ranch in Farmersville, North Texas. The group arrived in the evening and immediately went searching. In the wooded area, law enforcement officers stumbled upon a piece of metal covering something. There was an unbearable smell of decay nearby. However, those who arrived were prepared not only for this, but also for what caused it. Indeed, on the other side of the shield lay a female body, wrapped in a blue sheet. The corpse was covered with a blanket and 2 red-gold towels with bloodstains. A pile of trash mixed with dirt became the improvised gravestone for the unfortunate. It was clear that the perpetrator was an amateur, as trying to hide the result of their actions, they made it more noticeable. The condition of the body was terrible. After a week under the scorching sun, it had significantly decomposed. Experts needed 7 days to officially identify the victim. For this, dental records of the presumed victim were requested. As the investigation suspected, the discovered body belonged to 27-year-old Jessie Bardwell. The examination showed that the young woman's death was the result of a crime. However, the exact cause could not be determined as the body was too decomposed. Notably, an unknown informant pointed to the location of the woman's remains. Their name was not disclosed until the end. Jessie Bardwell, a beloved daughter and friend, seemingly vanished from the home she shared with her boyfriend named Jason Lowe. Sensing trouble, Gary set off from Mississippi to Texas in search of his child. His instincts were correct. His girl had indeed been in danger for quite some time. But let's start from the beginning. It must be said that the father-daughter relationship was exceptionally strong. Gary recalled being deeply moved at the moment of Jessie's birth. She was so fragile and vulnerable that his heart melted and never belonged to him again. Jessie was born on September 10, 1988, in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Gary and Carla Bardwell were wonderful parents, and besides their daughter, they raised a son named Brandon. The siblings got along well, with the older brother always protecting his little sister from bullies. Grandma Kitty, who adored her grandchildren, was a frequent visitor. She read books to them, shared life stories, and invented various games. In short, they were the quintessential American family. Jessie herself was a joyful, cheerful, and kind girl. She had a unique style that set her apart from her friends. She dreamed of making it in the beauty industry and opening her own salon. When Jessie was 14, the family unit broke down. The Bardwells divorced. When it came time to choose whom to live with, the girl chose her father. Their relationship was warm and trusting. Gary worked as a firefighter, so Jessie often called him to check on him and ensure everything was fine. Over time, the man remarried. However, the stepdaughter and stepmother got along well. Gina was an excellent homemaker and took care of everyone in the household. Jessie understood that her father was happy and not alone with such a woman by his side, which was very important to her, since she would eventually leave the nest. After finishing school, Jessie decided to become independent, so she moved to Orange Beach, Alabama. To support herself, she worked as a waitress at the popular beachfront restaurant Cobalt. Gary remembered how she loved being near the water. It calmed her. Father and daughter kept in constant touch, exchanging messages. When he visited, they would go boating and fishing. Kimberly Esbury, the restaurant manager and Jessie's friend, learned that Jessie's father was a talented musician. Upon retiring, he devoted more time to his passion, honing his skills. As a result, he was often invited to perform at the establishment and even had his own table there. Kimberly later admitted to admiring the relationship between Jessie and her father. They were true friends. Jessie was always present at his performances. The tips she earned went towards college and her dream. At work, she met a young man named Terry Ellis, also a waiter. They started dating after some time. Their relationship was steady and serious. They seemed like a harmonious couple. However, at one of the social events, Jessie was taken by his friend Jason Lowe. Her sudden infatuation surprised everyone. It seemed she was head over heels in love with him, oblivious to everything else around her. After explaining her sudden feelings, Jessie and Terry parted as amicably as they had met. Nonetheless, this decision turned her life upside down by 360 degrees. The new boyfriend was undoubtedly handsome and promising. He had 2 degrees and a decent job. Jason knew how to present himself and was polite. However, for Jessie, the new feelings were also a ticket to a new life. When he heard about his beloved's dreams, he promised to fulfill them. Eventually, the young man needed to transfer to Dallas, Texas. Then, Jessie followed him. The new position in the technology industry promised Jason a high-paying job. Kimberly shared that Jessie saw the move more as an adventure than something that could fundamentally change her life. She certainly didn't want to part with her father for long and hesitated for a while. However, ambition and youthful idealism prevailed. She did all this in secret from Gary. She was very afraid of disappointing her father, knowing he would be against it. Therefore, she didn't tell him even when they spent their last Christmas together. Mr. Bardwell noticed nothing unusual in his daughter's behavior. She was as happy as usual, laughing and joking. So, the 24-year-old found herself in Richardson, a suburb of Dallas. Jason worked from home, while Jessie searched for a new job and scouted locations for her salon. The couple planned to marry and buy a house. However, Jessie's relationship with her father underwent a drastic change. They grew distant. The daughter stopped answering his calls. Mr. Bardwell was troubled by this uncharacteristic behavior. After speaking with Kimberly, he learned about Jessie's new boyfriend and her move to another state. Ultimately, the man accepted the news and tried to re-establish contact. That's when he discovered that Jason controlled all communications. The only way to speak with Jessie was to call her boyfriend or the home phone. After each attempt, Jason would say she'd call back. Eventually, Jessie did indeed get in touch with her father. Months later, Gary finally met the suspicious young man in person when the couple visited Pascagoula. The father tried to convince his daughter not to return to Texas. He had a strong dislike for Lowe. That time, Jessie hugged him tighter than usual. When Gary asked if everything was okay, she said it was fine. She expressed her desire to make them proud, hence her need to leave. Persuading Jessie otherwise was impossible. Despite never showing signs of distress, her father had a bad feeling. After meeting with her, he wrote a song titled "Taken," dedicated to his daughter. 4 months after moving to Texas, she stopped responding to calls altogether. The final straw came on May 8th, when she failed to wish her mother and stepmother a happy Mother's Day, uncharacteristic of her. Gary sensed something terrible had happened, especially since she missed such a cherished family holiday. He called Jason, who claimed he didn't know Jessie's whereabouts. The boyfriend mentioned they were in an open relationship, allowing her to come and go as she pleased. Gary knew this to be false. Jason contradicted himself. He was very jealous and controlled every move. The next morning, the father headed to Texas, convinced of the boyfriend's involvement in his daughter's disappearance. En route, he messaged Lowe, "If Jesse isn't home when I arrive, you're in big trouble." Upon reaching their apartment, he found no trace of his daughter or her belongings. Yet, the boyfriend persisted he was unaware of her location and awaited her return. Later, Kimberly shared details Jesse confided during their rare heart-to-heart conversations. Apparently, Jason squandered money on prohibited substances and entertainment. His promises to fulfill the girl's dream evaporated. Largely, the boyfriend pretended to be someone he wasn't. This extended to his treatment of Jesse. Publicly, their relationship appeared one way, but in private, Jason could be rude and aggressive, leading to frequent conflicts between them. With Jesse missing from the house, Gary filed a missing person report with the Richardson police. Detective Hiram Hale, a father of 3 daughters, led the investigation into her disappearance. The man was determined to uncover the truth. Law enforcement officials acted immediately. They spoke with Lowe several times and inspected the house, but found no trace of the missing woman. During the conversation, the young man mentioned that he last saw her on May 8th around 10 a.m., leaving without explanation, possibly to visit her parents. He saw her get into her Acura car and drive away. Jason kept insisting that despite strong feelings, their relationship was non-committal. He claimed he didn't control her or pry into her personal life. However, investigators received information contradicting his statements. It turned out Jesse had sold her car 3 weeks earlier, a fact he surely knew since he was present at the sale. This raised questions for the investigators, prompting them to interrogate him again. On May 12th, during a subsequent search of his home, police found a strip of powder on a plate in the kitchen. The substance turned out to be cocaine. The investigation then focused on Lowe's garage and the vehicle inside it. Initially resistant, citing the garage was shared and needed others' permission for a search, Lowe eventually ceased his objections. Upon entering, officers immediately noticed a smell characteristic of crime. Jason Lowe's Audi was mud-splattered, and its bumper was detached. Police suspected that Jessica Bardwell might be inside the car. Although the vehicle was empty, the smell of decomposition intensified. Inside, they found the broken bumper and what appeared to be bloodstains in the trunk. When experts sprayed a luminol-based substance, the cargo area lit up with blue light. Blood, presumably belonging to the missing woman. Jason explained he got stuck in the mud while searching for his girlfriend, catching the bumper on a bush. He remained adamant about not knowing her whereabouts. He could not explain the blood in the car or the presence of controlled substances in his home. Experts concluded the amount of blood in the trunk indicated the woman was deceased. Given the circumstances, the case was reclassified as a homicide. To prevent the main suspect from fleeing, he was detained on charges related to the narcotic substances. During interrogation, Lowe persisted in his narrative. When shown a photo of his loved one, he refused to provide explanations, looking emotionlessly at the picture and suggesting he was being framed for something he didn't do. Eventually, despite the absence of a body, the suspect was charged with homicide. As the search for the young woman continued, a challenging and lengthy process in the vastness of Texas, with its many rivers, lakes, fields, and forests, where a body could easily be concealed, her family, friends, and sympathetic acquaintances held a memorial service. The event took place on the beach by the water Jesse loved. Everyone prayed for her to be found and for justice for her suffering. Their prayers were answered on May 19th when Jessica Bardwell was found deceased. Her loved ones at least had the chance to mourn her and say goodbye. Gary felt it necessary to review his daughter's autopsy report. He was appalled that his girl, wrapped in a sheet and barely recognizable as a human, was discarded like trash. Her body was returned to her hometown thanks to Gary's friends. Former colleagues hired and loaded Jessie into a funeral hearse. About 1,000 people visited the First United Methodist Church to pay their respects to the victim. Kitty Bardwell, Jessie's grandmother, confessed, "If this town could be cleansed with the tears shed for Jessie, it would truly be clean." The tragedy that struck their family garnered widespread attention, with many expressing sincere condolences for their premature loss, coming forward to support the Bardwells. A year had passed. Gary sat in McKinney Jail in Texas, still reluctantly cooperating with the investigation. However, 2 facts regarding Jessie's case were eventually extracted from him. Firstly, he claimed what happened to her was an accident, planning to reveal the details in court, hoping for the jury's understanding. This made it challenging for the prosecution to build their case during the trial, much to the delight of Andy Farkas, Lowe's attorney. Farkas staged a mock trial with outsiders acting as jurors. Based on the available evidence and Jason's confession, the mock trial regarding Jessica's case fell apart. 15 pseudo-jurors decided to acquit Lowe. Farkas hoped that knowing the truth, a real court would also deliver a not guilty verdict. Remember the anonymous tip about the victim's body location? It turned out that information came from Jason himself. This became another piece of evidence obtained during the investigation. The prosecution offered a deal to reduce his sentence by half if he disclosed Jessie's location. After deliberation and consultation with his lawyer, he agreed, requesting that the source of the information remain confidential until the trial. The deal was motivated by law enforcement's desire to allow Jessie's family to say goodbye and bury her body humanely. As time went on, the grief-stricken father longed for justice. To quell his raging fury, he once decided to take a unique approach. Gary printed a photo of Jason, placed it on a stump, and pounded it with a 12-pound sledgehammer. This form of psychological therapy offered him some, albeit small, relief. Mr. Bardwell confessed to struggling to get out of bed in the mornings, living with the hope that Lowe would soon face trial and be convicted for the murder of his only daughter. He blamed himself for what happened, regretting not convincing his daughter to stay, or at least break up with her controlling boyfriend. Jessie once called her father, admitting he was right after arguing with Jason, who had kicked her out. She was sheltered by a new friend, but returned to her boyfriend the next day, giving him another chance. Gary had no choice but to accept his daughter's decision, a choice he would deeply regret later. When the trial finally began, Mr. Bardwell arrived in Texas, determined to achieve just punishment. Prosecutor Cynthia Walker began her opening statement by characterizing Jason. Most viewed him as a complex personality with few friends, mostly avoided due to his long history with controlled substances, often leading to uncontrollable rage. Perhaps Jessie was caught in one of these moments. Prosecutor Wes Wynn called Lowe's former girlfriends as witnesses. They confirmed the prosecution's claims about his aggression, sharing fears for their lives due to his jealousy-driven violence. Like with Jessie, he isolated them from family and friends, displaying clear manipulative and pathological lying traits. Hence, each ended their relationship, which was no easy feat, requiring caution and cunning. Conversely, Lowe showcased his superiority among men, effectively pulling the wool over people's eyes. Jason quickly responded to these court revelations. He disclosed starting substance use at 13, influenced by friends, leading to addiction. Nevertheless, he strived to not lose his way in life, achieving multiple degrees and working for a renowned global company. Lowe confessed his desire to fulfill Jessie's dream out of love, aiming to build a family with her. In contrast, the prosecution painted a picture of a man far from someone who had recently lost his beloved, and here's why. The investigation determined that the young woman's demise occurred between May 1st and May 3rd, presumably on the day when the Jordans, the couple's neighbors, last saw her alive. Following an argument that led to Jessie's demise, Jason moved her body to the garage and placed it in the trunk of his car, where it remained for several days. The blood traces found in the Audi indeed belonged to Jessie. He later transported her body to a remote farm and concealed it in the nearby woods. It was established that the sheet wrapping the body was part of Lowe's bedding set, which was still found in his home. Fearlessly using it even after Jessie's death, while her body was decomposing in the car, the accused continued to see other women. His phone was filled with corroborative messages and intimate photos, which he sent to these women before meeting them at his apartment. Jason explained that he was trying to distract himself and forget, often indulging in substance use, claiming it made dealing with reality easier. The investigation learned of Jason's presence at Jessie's time of death through a clever manipulation. As the suspect had long denied involvement, detectives asked Tommy Jordan, an acquaintance, to speak with Jason. During their monitored conversation, Lowe admitted he messed up and made a mistake, confessing to an unfortunate accident with Jessie and his guilt, albeit for criminal negligence. Law enforcement took this as a confession. Realizing the investigation was on to him, Jason struck a deal with the prosecution and disclosed the body's location. At the trial, he finally shared his version of events. That evening, he and Jessie took pills that enhanced libido and then became intimate in the shower. At one point, Jason slipped, followed by Jessie, who hit her head on the porcelain bathtub. She then sat down, complaining of feeling hot and dizzy. Jason claimed he offered to call an ambulance, but Jessie refused, suggesting rest and sleep would suffice. However, he found her unconscious the next morning, lying on his chest without breathing. Despite his attempts to revive her, Jessie was dead. Fearing being accused of homicide, he hesitated to call the police and decided to act on his own, initially leaving the body in his car. Days later, he resolved to hide the body on a remote farm, where he carelessly disposed of his former lover in a pile of trash without a proper burial. His story might have been believable if not for the defendant's character and the forensic medical examination findings. The woman had suffered cranial injuries, which couldn't have resulted from slaps to the face, indicating Jason attempted to conceal evidence of a beating. Thus, his entire narrative was fabricated. After a 6-hour deliberation, the jury found him guilty. Judge Scott Becker sentenced the criminal to 50 years in prison. The term could have been longer, up to 99 years, but was reduced due to Jason's deal with the prosecution as agreed. Lowe won't be eligible for parole until at least 2041. At the verdict announcement, Gary was relieved justice prevailed, yet he saw no remorse in the young man's eyes. Standing with the victim's father were Jason's ex-girlfriends. One, Chrissy Chambers, remarked that if she could say anything to Jessie, it would be, "Run, just save yourself." To this day, the convicted Lowe denies his guilt in the homicide, insisting it was an accident. The love of his life decayed in his car while he continued to live and entertain himself. Tragically, Jessie Bardwell saw the dark side of Jason Lowe too late. Daddy's girl hadn't realized how deceitful and brutal men could be, having always had a model of male integrity and care in her father Gary. Regrettably, scoundrels possess a peculiar charm, easily lying or embellishing to intrigue or enamor. This story is a cautionary tale that a woman must choose herself, her safety, and her freedom always and regardless. Otherwise, the story's end can be tragic, not just for her, but for her entire family. 40 years ago, an American teenager was found bludgeoned to death in a cemetery in New Jersey. Her face was so badly injured that it was impossible to identify her at the time. The American public began to refer to her as Princess Doe, the Jane Doe who had died too young. For 4 decades, her real name has been a mystery, until now. Hi, and welcome to Mysterious 7. I'm Michael, and today's episode, I'm going to take you guys through the story of how Princess Doe was killed, how her identity was revealed, and how her killer was finally caught. Let's get right into it. Princess Doe was a previously unidentified American teenager from West Babylon, New York. She was found murdered in Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown, New Jersey, on the 15th of July, 1982. Her face had been bludgeoned beyond recognition. Her case gained national attention, and the public took a special interest in unraveling her story and finding answers. She became the first unidentified dead body to be entered into the National Crime Information Center. On the morning of Thursday, July 15, 1982, at around 8 a.m., gravedigger George Keyes discovered the body of a young girl in the rear section of the Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown, New Jersey. The body was found lying on its back, just over a steep bank that leads to a creek below. The victim's face had been beaten beyond recognition with a yet-to-be-determined object. Due to the significant decomposition of her body, even her eye color could not be confirmed. The young girl was dressed in a red short-sleeved shirt. A peasant-style skirt was found lying on top of the victim's legs. No footwear or undergarments were found. No conclusive evidence was found, but this was difficult to determine because of how much the body was decayed. A golden cross necklace was found tangled in the victim's hair. 2 earrings were found in her left ear. Red nail polish was found on the right hand only, and she had no surgical scars, distinct birthmarks, or tattoos. Scars or marks on the head or face area could not be known due to the condition of the body. Forensic anthropologists determined that the victim was not pregnant and had never given birth, and was most likely between the ages of 18 and 14 years old at the time of her death. Toxicology did not reveal any traces of drugs, but was not entirely conclusive because of the time elapsed between the death and the discovery of the body. It is believed that the body was discovered after 2 to 3 days, or possibly even weeks, of exposure to the elements. This was especially difficult to determine because of the hot and humid weather in the area at that time. The forensic examination indicated that the girl had attempted to fight back or defend herself from her attacker, as injuries indicating trauma to her hands and arms were visible. The girl's body was buried in the Cedar Ridge Cemetery, not far from where she was discovered in January 1983. Donated funds were used to pay for the victim's coffin and headstone. The headstone was engraved with the text, "Princess Doe, missing from home. Dead among strangers, remembered by all." For many years, Princess Doe was thought to be Diane Janice Guy, a missing teenager from San Jose, California, who vanished on July 30, 1979. This theory was propagated by several law enforcement officials in the state of New Jersey, who went as far as to hold a press conference identifying Diane Dye as Princess Doe. However, Lieutenant Eric Kranz, the Princess Doe case's original lead investigator, maintained that Diane Dye was not a viable candidate for Princess Doe's identity. Kranz's feelings were shared by Diane's family and investigators in California, who were particularly angered by the conduct of the New Jersey law enforcement. In 2003, Princess Doe's DNA was compared with a DNA sample from Diane's mother, Patricia, and it was conclusively determined that Princess Doe was not Diane Dye. After seeing images of the girl's clothing in the newspaper, a witness named Anne-Marie Latimer reported to officials that she remembered seeing a girl wearing the same clothing as Princess Doe purchasing cigarettes on July 13, 1982, just 2 days before her body was found. Latimer stated that she was shopping with her daughter at a supermarket across from the cemetery and observed and was able to describe the victim's clothing. The shirt and skirt themselves were traced to a manufacturer in the Midwestern United States, although the brand labels were missing. 3 people reported, after viewing the photos, that they had bought similar clothes at a Long Island store, which is now closed. On September 22, 1999, the body of Princess Doe was exhumed from the Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown so that DNA samples could be taken. The body was reburied in the same location. After a 2012 photo composite of the victim was released, it generated new tips, as it resembled several missing girls from across the country. One theory was submitted that Princess Doe may have been a runaway and could have been an individual using false names while employed at a hotel in Ocean City, Maryland. In 2012, a sample of her hair and a tooth were examined through isotope analysis and indicated that the victim was most likely born in the United States. At least 7 to 10 months in the Midwestern or Northeastern United States. The tooth sample indicated she could be from Arizona. It is also believed that the girl had spent a long time in Long Island, New York. Lieutenant Kranz, now retired, coined the name Princess Doe early in the investigations and also managed to get the case covered extensively in the media. The case was used as the impetus for recording unidentified crime victims in the MCIC database at the national level. Princess Doe became the first such case entered by the FBI director. After extensive print media coverage in 1982, Lieutenant Kranz, who was the original lead investigator from the Blairstown Police Department, was contacted by HBO regarding the Princess Doe case and asked if the channel could chronicle the case in an upcoming documentary entitled Missing. Kranz agreed, and the segment was filmed over several weeks. Kranz was shown following leads as they came in. The documentary featured actual footage of the recovery of Princess Doe's body, along with footage shot by HBO of Princess Doe's 1983 funeral. The case was also featured on America's Most Wanted in 2012 in hopes of generating new information about the case. The same year, the most recent reconstruction was broadcast on CNN. On July 15, 2012, a memorial service was held for the 30th anniversary of Princess Doe being discovered at the top of the ravine where her remains were found. Over 100 citizens attended, as well as several reporters and cameras. The victim's clothing as well as her photo reconstructions were on display for public viewing. On October 12, 2014, Princess Doe was honored at a missing persons rally in the area. In the years between the first discovery in the body and the final identification, several theories cropped up. The first one was that Princess Doe was actually Diane Dye, a young girl missing from California, which has now been definitively disproved. Secondly, the killer of Princess Doe was already in prison for another homicide. A man called John Reese was briefly suspected, as he was convicted of killing another woman in nearby Belvedere, New Jersey, but there was no real evidence of a connection with Princess Doe. The third theory was that Princess Doe was either a runaway that was known to work in the Ocean City, Maryland area, or a prostitute who worked at the local truck stop. The information for these two possibilities was highly inconclusive. Nobody from the local area came forward to identify Princess Doe, on or off the record. It seems unlikely that not one single person would come forward if she was known in the area. The fourth and disturbing theory was that Princess Doe was killed by a Blairstown police officer, and that is why the case was never solved. But this claim is completely unsubstantiated. There are retired local law enforcement officers who still follow and contribute to the case, even after 40 years. The fifth theory was that Princess Doe was a victim of a serial killer known to operate in the area, such as John Kleiss, Henry Lee Lucas, or Joel Rifkin. Though local law enforcement was aware of these claims, none were found to be credible. A sixth theory was that Princess Doe was an out-of-state teenager who worked at an area camp. Again, this was never proven. And now we come to the seventh theory, that Princess Doe was killed by a man named Arthur Kinlaw. For many years, this was the most current theory. Many of the facts fit the case, and this theory was explored on the America's Most Wanted website. Several New York Newsday articles referenced this theory that was published in 1999 and 2000. Mr. Kinlaw was already in prison for other crimes, but since Princess Doe's body wasn't identified, his involvement in her murder could not be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Princess Doe's body was re-exhumed in November 2020 using a grant, and she underwent DNA extraction for genetic genealogy. In May 2021, investigators were notified by the NCMEC, or National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who were collaborating with Astria Forensics about obtaining DNA markers from degraded samples of Princess Doe's body using a grant. On June 18, 2021, investigators received the news that Astria Forensic agreed to extract DNA and construct a DNA profile. On February 10, 2022, Astria Forensics relayed to investigators that the creation of a DNA data file was successful. The results were sent to the NCMEC's consulting genealogist from Innovative Forensics Investigations. The managing officer was Jennifer Moore, who agreed to perform unlimited genealogy testing free of charge. On February 22, 2022, Innovative Forensics announced to investigators that they had found a candidate for Princess Doe. Investigators went to West Babylon, New York, where they met Robert Olenick Jr., Princess Doe's brother. They also collected a DNA sample from Princess Doe's sister, which mitotyping technology used to build a mitochondrial DNA profile. The Union County Prosecutor's Office Forensic Laboratory assisted by creating an STR-DNA profile through the victim's sister's DNA sample. Mitotyping technology sent their results to the Union County Prosecutor's Office Forensic Laboratory, then sent both the mitochondrial DNA and STR DNA profiles to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification. On April 29, 2022, the center identified Princess Doe as Dawn Olenick. Her identity was formally announced on July 15, 2022, the 40th anniversary of her discovery. Robert Olenick Jr. said that Olenick left their home at her mother's request, and she was never seen or heard from again. Way back in 1999, evidence came to light that Arthur and Donna Kinlaw may have been involved in Princess Doe's murder. Donna was arrested in California for attempting to commit welfare fraud by using the name Eliana, which was traced to a Long Island native. When the police questioned her, she gave them details about the murder of Linda, and her testimony put the Kinlaws behind bars. Donna gave details about 2 murders Arthur had committed, of 2 other female victims, who remain unidentified today. After Arthur was faced with a death sentence, Donna told authorities that Kinlaw had killed another woman, a sex worker, earlier in 1982. She told police that she was with Arthur in the cemetery and witnessed him commit the murder. Another report states that Donna Kinlaw said that in July 1982, her husband brought home a teenage girl, left home, and returned without her. He later apparently disposed of his clothing and cleaned his vehicle. Afterward, he threatened his wife, claiming if she did not attend her job, he would take her life, as he did to the girl he brought home. However, a lack of corroboration meant that Arthur Kinlaw was not charged. Lieutenant Stephen Spears, who worked on the case as a member of the Warren County Prosecutor's Office, from which he is now retired, stated that Kinlaw claimed responsibility for her death, but I have no physical evidence to confirm that, and without the identity of Princess Doe, I have no way of connecting the dots, so to speak, putting her in a place where he could have been or would have been at the same time. Spears also reported that he doubted the confession because the Kinlaws could not provide a name for Princess Doe, even though they claimed to have been with her for some time. Even though he questioned the credibility of their statements, Spears does not believe the victim was native to Long Island, New York. However, Donna Kinlaw was interviewed by a forensic artist who created a sketch of the girl she claimed to have met, which does resemble the most recent composite. Arthur Kinlaw remained incarcerated for 2 counts of second-degree murder. Following the 2022 investigation of Princess Doe as Dawn Olenick, Arthur Kinlaw was reconsidered as a suspect and later charged with Olenick's murder. Dawn Olenick was born on August 5, 1964. She had been a junior at Connequot High School in Bohemia, New York, where she had lived with her mother and sister, authorities said. But she soon moved out of the family home. According to her brother, she was thrown out of her home by her mom. She ended up getting killed in a cemetery, leaving no clue as to her real identity. But for more than 20 years, the name of her suspected killer was no secret. In 1999, the wife of Arthur Kinlaw, the convicted pimp who today is serving time for the murder of many other Long Island women, tied her husband not only to those deaths, but to the brutal slaying of the girl in the Blairstown Cemetery. In an interview with Newsday at the time, Donna Kinlaw recounted how her husband, in the summer of 1982, brought a girl of about 18 years old back to their Central Islip home. She told the newspaper as well as police that her husband left with the woman, but later returned home alone, appearing shaken. About 2 weeks later, according to Newsday, she read that police in Belvedere, New Jersey, had found the body of a dead girl who fit the description of the girl who was in their house that night. He kept saying, "What does it say? What does it say? Does it say who the person was who got killed?" She said her husband asked. From the story she read aloud to her husband, Donna Kinlaw told Newsday that she remembered that the New Jersey police named the dead girl Princess Jane Doe. Not long afterward, investigators exhumed her body to recover the murder victim's femur bone in hopes of using her DNA to identify her. And in fact, investigators acknowledged that Arthur Kinlaw confessed to the New Jersey murder in written statements dating back to 2005. But it was not until April of this year that Dawn Olenick was positively identified. Arthur Kinlaw, now 68, is currently imprisoned in Sullivan County, New York, on 2 other first-degree murder convictions from 2000. Among them was a teenager he knew only as Linda in April 1984 in the Bronx, Newsday reported. "I strangled her with my hand," said Kinlaw. "She was hit about the head, by me, with a bat." Arthur Kinlaw has now been charged with 1 count of homicide as the result of the subsequent investigation, witness statements, and his confession of Olenick's murder. It is believed that after Don Olenick refused his demands to go into prostitution, he drove her to New Jersey. They both ended up in Blairstown, where Kinlaw murdered her in the Cedar Ridge Cemetery. Neither Olenick nor Kinlaw had a connection with the town. Kinlaw remains imprisoned at the Sullivan Correctional Facility in Fallsburg, New York. Investigators are now looking to piece together Don Olenick's movements in the time leading up to her death. The DNA Doe Project, also DNA Doe Project Incorporated or DDP, is an American nonprofit volunteer organization formed to identify unidentified deceased persons, or commonly known as John or Jane Doe, by using forensic genealogy. Their volunteers identified victims of automobile accidents, homicides, and unusual circumstances, such as persons who committed suicide under an alias. The group was founded in 2017 by Colleen Fitzpatrick and Margaret Press. Unraveling the mystery of Princess Doe has been a sensational success for genealogical DNA testing of exactly this kind. Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest impact, and for the case of Princess Doe, that was exactly what happened. A molar root weighing just 200 kilograms would hold the answers that had eluded investigators for close to 40 years. With the help of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Princess Doe's molar and eyelash were submitted to Astria Forensics in 2021 for possible DNA extraction. What is so special about Astria is that they can extract DNA from samples that are degraded or otherwise would provide no value, said Carol Schweitzer, a forensic supervisor at NCMEC. We knew that if anyone could get the information that was needed, Astria could. And they did. Kelly Kincaid, CEO of Astria Forensics, told NCMEC that they were lucky to find that the DNA was exceptionally well preserved and allowed for millions of pieces of information to be gathered to complete the DNA profile. This single DNA extract contained hundreds of millions of unique human DNA fragments, said Kelly. With these sequencing data, we were able to reconstruct her whole genome single nucleotide polymorphisms or SMP profile. This resulted in Astria being able to deliver genotype files to NCMEC and the Warren County Prosecutor's Office that could go on and be used to complete Princess Doe's genealogy. This technology that would not have been possible 40 years ago was just the break the investigators had been hoping for to identify Princess Doe's identity. Once Astria finished the sequencing, Innovative Forensic Investigations, or IFI, started to work on investigative genetic genealogy techniques to build a family tree that would ultimately lead to the true identity of Princess Doe, or who we now know as Don Olenick. This work was only possible because of the collaborative effort of each agency, said Jennifer Moore, CEO of IFI. Our team brings forward a diverse set of skills that allows us to help find answers to cases. Echoing Moore's sentiment in today's press conference, Prosecutor Pfeiffer reiterated that science and technology made the impossible possible in this case. Don's case was deeply personal for the investigators involved, and their push for answers and justice never wavered. Don's family expressed deep gratitude to everyone who worked to find answers in Don's case. "This is a very big deal for my family," said Don's cousin. "I'd like to thank Blairstown for treating my cousin like she was one of their own. It touches our family deeply. My cousin is always in my heart," he said while tapping the photo of Don pinned to his chest. Blairstown gave it their all and never gave up. We were greatly appreciative of that. Since Princess Doe was the first unidentified persons case to be entered into NCIC, the National Crime Information Center, by the director of the FBI, William Webster, on June 30, 1983, this was a historic moment for missing and unidentified persons that has continued to play a crucial role in investigations since. The entry in NCIC has remained current and alive until today, when she will be removed. The tenacity of law enforcement has never stopped, and they continue to pour resources and new technology into solving this case. And it's thanks to the collaboration between police authorities and genealogical DNA testing experts that Princess Doe was publicly identified on the 40th anniversary of the discovery of her body as Don Olenick. So, what do you guys think about this 40-year-old case finally getting resolved? Do you still have any theories about Princess Doe? Let us know in the comments section.